noticed, and copies of the agenda were posted to the Board of Accountancy website on April the 27th, 2020. And Karen, I should have done a roll check, a mic check on you, but if you are there and able to hear us, can you please go ahead and call the roll so that we can establish a quorum?
Yes, sir. I hope you all can hear me okay.
Yes.
Andy Bonner.
Here.
Janet Booker Davis.
Here.
Pamela Church.
Here.
Stephen Eldridge.
Here.
Larry Elmore.
Here.
Greg Gilbert.
Here.
Kevin Monroe.
Here.
Gay Moon.
Here.
Trey Watson.
Here.
Judy Weatherby. Here.
Okay, and just for the record, Todd Skelton sent word that because of a conflicting meeting with the Governor's Unified Command Task Force, he will be joining our meeting a little bit later this morning. The next item that we have is the statement of necessity, given that this meeting is being done via WebEx, and for that, I'll turn it over to Maria, one of our legal counsel members.
Thank you, Kevin. So I'm just going to read, some of it's redundant, but this is for the electronic venue that we have. So this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy, which is taking place via teleconference. Notice of this meeting was posted to the board's website on Monday, April 27, 2020. As there is not a physical quorum present, a statement of necessity will be read into the record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State as required by statute. Pursuant to TCA 8-44108B2, which states if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, then in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. That determination must include a recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Further, TCA 844-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting require timely action by the body, that physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communication is necessary. As stated, this is a scheduled meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy, and the purpose of this meeting with members attending by teleconference is to conduct the quarterly scheduled meeting of the board via teleconference due to COVID-19. All voting will be conducted by roll call. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I appreciate that. We'll just start real briefly here with introductions. And I think many of you know Toby Compton. He is the Assistant Commissioner, and he oversees the Division of Regulatory Boards for the Department of Commerce and Insurance, including the Board of Accountancy. And so, Toby, we're glad you can join us electronically. We wish we were all able to meet safely in person. But if you have any thoughts or remarks that you'd like to make at this point, you are most welcome to, Toby.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that very much. I sure do wish that we could all be together in person as well. A buddy of mine the other day said to me, he said, you know, boy, what I would give to work a room right now. And for those of us who are extroverts, you sure get that, and you sure would like to shake some hands and give some hugs. But it's good to be with y'all today. I just wanted to share a couple things and kind of update you guys. First of all, thanks for being such a great board. You know, this particular program is ran well. You guys conduct business well, and you're professionals, and I greatly appreciate that. A big shout out and thank you to Wendy and Karen and the other program staff. They've done a tremendous job despite being out of the office and everybody being virtual. So I get the opportunity. I probably talk to Wendy every couple, 2 or 3 days, and they just do a great job. And I know they serve you guys very well. And also Stuart and Maria, they give such great legal advice. They're a great team. I always appreciate them. As you guys probably all know, we're going to be out of the office, out of the physical building at Davy Crockett until probably the end of May. that's made things challenging, but our particular division and our department were very early adopters of the AWS platform. So remote work isn't something that's foreign to us, and we've transitioned very well. In fact, we were probably one of the earliest departments to fully transition over to a remote work environment, and I think that's been a good thing for us in general. Largely the only thing that we're serving the public, but largely the only thing that we're missing right now is the customers who walk into the building to get personal service. That really isn't your profession. Your program doesn't really have a lot of walk-ins. So I'm confident that we're serving the accounting community very well. Across the board in the division, our metrics are lower, particularly on the initial applications. It's probably not a surprise to anyone, but our overall numbers are holding up fairly well, and that's true in the accountancy program specifically. We're not seeing a lot of drop off. I think the numbers will tell us a different story over the next 6 to 8 weeks as we track things, but I think by and large, the public is being served and everything is getting done in this remote world. That's really all I have to say. If there's any other updates, we're working with staff, we're meeting frequently and talking to them. So I feel confident that we're getting our work done and that things are going well. And I just wanted to say good morning to you guys and thank you all for your service to the state and to your professions. And if there's anything I can ever do for you, I think part of my job is to knock down the barriers and the impediments and try to make things as smooth as possible. So please, by all means, call on me anytime.
Toby, thank you so much, and especially appreciate your shout out to the staff of the Board of Accountancy and to the members of the board who are just giving up of their time to help promote, maintain, and care for our profession. So appreciate the work that you do and the work that the commission, the overall commission does, not only for our board, but for the more than probably 27 or so other boards that you all are responsible for. So thank you very much. Do any of the other board members or Wendy, do you have any follow-up comments?
I just happy to have Toby here today. I know you all hadn't had a chance to meet him, and hopefully he can join us next time in person, maybe for a few minutes, and have some breakfast with us next time.
I like breakfast.
Well, we'll try to make that happen here. Thank you again, Toby. Appreciate you joining us this morning. I've got a handful of announcements that I'll make. Many of them are kind of just reiterations of the protocols that we're going to follow since we're meeting remotely. As indicated, this call is open to the public and will be available for replay in the next day or two. Video is optional, and if your connection becomes unstable, you may want to just consider dialing in using the audio only feature, but right now it looks like everybody's well connected. Please keep your line on mute unless you wish to speak. And then for those board members who do wish to speak, given kind of the format that we have, if you can use the chat all feature, which is kind of the little comment circle that materializes when you move your mouse over the bottom of the screen, and just say, I want to speak to this, I'll recognize you in the order in which I see those pop up, and then we'll make sure everyone has a chance to chime in whenever they would wish on the issues that we'll be discussing and voting on. Again, because of the special nature of the way this meeting is being conducted, if there are members of the public that wish to speak, we will allow for comments during the old new business portion of the meeting. Also, because of the manner in which we're meeting remotely, all action items taken today will require a roll call vote. And so those are the announcements that I have, and we'll go ahead and start working through the agenda here. The first order of business is the approval, the review and adoption of the agenda. So the agenda has been public noticed. And so is there a motion to adopt the agenda for today's meeting?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda today.
Thank you. And could you, as you speak, if you could just identify yourself by name, because we have some people on video and some on phone. So who was that made the motion?
This is Andy Bonner.
Okay, Andy, thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second. This is Judy Weatherby.
Okay, I heard a second, I think first from Gail. Is that right? From Gail, I'm sorry.
It was not me.
Okay.
It was Judy.
Judy, okay, thank you for the second there. So we have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Is there any comment or discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and call the roll on the motion to adopt today's agenda. Karen, could you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore, I'm not hearing Larry. Is anyone else?
I'm not hearing Larry either at this point. Let's go ahead and continue with the roll, and then we'll see if we can get Larry back connected here.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Jay Moon,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby. Aye.
Okay, thank you, Karen. That
Okay.
motion passes, and we'll.
Apparently.
Sorry, was that Larry?
How do I do that? It's frozen.
Sound a little bit like Greg. We're going to continue on. The motion passes, and hopefully we'll continue to work with. Maybe Dustin can work with Larry to see if we can get his audio back running here. The next action item is for the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 28th, 2020. These were distributed to the board members ahead of time. So is there, we'll search first for a motion to approve those minutes.
Make a motion that we approve those minutes. Judy Weatherby.
I'll second that. This is Andy.
Okay, we have a motion by Judy Weatherby and a second by Andy to approve those minutes. Are there any comments or discussion? Hearing none, Karen, if you will call the roll on that vote to approve the minutes of the meeting of January 28th, 2020.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert, Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Jay Moon,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby. Aye. Larry Elmore.
Okay, thank you, Karen. The motion does pass, and we'll continue to work with Larry to see if we can get him back online. The next item on the agenda is with respect to a reinstatement application for Mr. Bradford Jones and also Jones and Associates CPA PLLC. At our prior regularly scheduled meeting, the board effectively accepted the application, but that requires separate action at a subsequent board meeting as to whether reinstatement will actually occur in this instance. And so I'll start by turning things over to Maria Bush. And Maria, if you can basically outline the background. We do have Brad Jones on the line. to make any comments and respond to any questions that board members have. But we'll first start, Maria, with you to kind of outline the status of the case.
Thank you, Kevin. So Mr. Jones was originally disciplined for lack of due professional care in 2017. And then subsequently, a complaint was opened for operating a firm permit without a firm permit and failure to enroll in peer review while providing attest services. Then Mr. Jones' license and firm permit were revoked due to non-compliance with his consent order from April 2018. He continued to practice as a CPA and operate his firm on a revoked license, and complaints were open due to such. Today, Mr. Jones is asking for reinstatement of his Nashville location firm permit and reinstatement of his CPA license. To date, he is compliant with the consent order issued from April 2018. That included a civil penalty and some continuing education hours that were satisfied since. As far as compliance, he was asked to comply, not hold himself out as a CPA to the public individually or in his capacity as acting as a firm. And so Mr. Jones has removed the references to being a CPA on his social media and business website. But he did conduct investigations as to 3 different locations where there are references to being certified public accountant, and there is signage in Memphis, Tennessee. That's an unregistered firm which indicates CPA. Nashville, Tennessee, that's a revoked firm, and that has signage indicating CPA. And then I just wanted to point out one thing. In the memorandum that I sent all of you prior to the meeting outlining these details, it said that the Gallatin location had completely complied, but the sign from the outer office is covered up for CPA, but on the actual door, it still indicates that they are CPAs. So I brought this to Mr. Jones' attention. This was mid-April. We had discussed this, so I just let him know that I was gonna kind of inform you on all these and let him address the board. Also, we have Stuart here who's worked with Mr. Jones. We can answer any questions you all might have, and then just let Mr. Jones address the board.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Appreciate the background information provided previously and also the summary just now. What we'll do, Brad, what I'd like to do is give you the opportunity to speak and make any points that you'd like to make with respect to your reinstatement application. And in particular, if you would, I'd like to ask you to address the apparent continuing instances of non-compliance with respect to your signage, what the current status is and what your intentions are with respect to that.
Okay. Yeah, just thanks for taking the time today to review my case. I do appreciate it. I'm excited to hopefully have this come to a conclusion since it has been going on since 2017. One thing though, my license was not revoked until I believe June or July of 2019 is when I got a notice. So it wasn't back in 2018. And then it was, I guess, done in December is when met with Sherry to get stuff reinstated. So, yeah, the case was definitely, I guess, back in 2017 was just embarrassing thing of when I did a review for a client that was a 2-line item balance sheet for a contractor's license application. Upon being notified by the client that they got a notice from the contractor's licenses board of review saying that I was not submitted in a peer review. Again, but I was like, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I apologize to the client, issued full refund, paid out of my own pocket for another firm to issue the report. That client was then able to still retain contractor's license in that same cycle. So there was no harm done to the public, and have not done any test services since that instance. Again, that was April of 2017. I corrected the situation and then did not hear from the board until I believe around July of 2017. So about 3 months later, after the client was already made whole. And again, have not done any test services. Upon being the stuff happening in June or July of 2019, where my license was revoked, and meeting with Sherry, did do a lot of big changes to try and comply with the, not using the designation, about changing website and domain names, again, which affected web traffic and season, definitely production this past. Removed it from business cards. Again, tried to do a sweep of any social media pages, Facebook, Google, Bing, whatever else was out there that I could try and think of and find. I know there was a couple small instances where something wasn't done, but again, was not trying to mislead the public or anything. About the two offices that were the signage was up. The one in Nashville was a shared sign with the tenant below us. And again, I was hoping to get this situation rectified, where we're not having to incur cost for another tenant on top of already the fees and reinstatements that I've done. In Memphis, again, it's a shared space workplace. Both locations do employ full-time employees and CPAs in active status. I work primarily out of our office. Sign what and tape was put over the signage. Again, did not really want to incur the cost of doing a glass door with the instance of coming, hopefully getting back reinstated. Again, no, not misleading, and we're not a firm that does in traffic. So again, the signage was not meant to bring in clients or to misuse, or abuse that trust of the public. Again, any services that we've issued to any location is only tax preparation and monthly bookkeeping reconciliations. Again, nothing, no attest services or anything like that.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate the overview from your perspective. And what I'd like to do now is using the chat function. If there are board members that have questions, just use the chat all and it will show up for me. And then I'll just recognize the board members who have questions in the order in which they appear in the chat all function, Brad, and then they'll be able to just ask your question of you here. So if for those that have questions, if you could use that function, I would appreciate it.
Oh, Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I just want to add, I know we addressed this in our test run for the meeting, but don't put your question in the chat box. Just put that you'd like to be acknowledged. I think that might be better just for public record.
Yes, I appreciate that clarification, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trey, I see that you have a question. Please go ahead.
Just a question for Wendy and staff. How cooperative, or what would you characterize the cooperation was from Mr. Jones during the process?
I think I'm going to let Sherry or Maria address that because they worked closer with him on trying to rectify the issues.
This is Sherry. I'll start because I had some of the initial interaction with Mr. Jones, and then I know Maria followed up. During our meeting in December, Brad was very cooperative in terms of wanting to know, what needed to be done. We spent quite a bit of time, if I recall, that afternoon, not only in terms of the applications and everything, but discussing, those areas where we needed to make sure that we weren't holding out to the public as a CPA. So, I would say, he was very cordial, very polite to me, asked a lot of questions, was very cooperative on that reinstatement portion in the December, January timeframe. Do you have anything to add? I was going to say, do you have anything to add, Maria? I know we have seen some issues with the signage, after the fact, but I know most of the interactions after that point came through you.
Yeah, I'll echo what Sherry said. Mr. Jones has been very responsive and professional and, communicating with us, and I do appreciate that. I will say, I think at one point, regarding the signage, we did discuss that, you don't have to get new signs, just covering it up somehow. And so that is one issue that I do see, is that the signage was not altered, but that's up to the board's discretion to determine. And Mr. Jones went through every instance that I pointed out on social media or his website, and he rectified all of those issues that had come up with holding himself out. And I know that takes time, especially technology can be finicky, so I do appreciate that. But yeah, there have been no issues that I need to discuss.
Thank you, Sherry and Maria. Are there any other board members that want to have a question put to, or would like to put a question to Mr. Jones? Just use the chat with all function to say you have a question, and I will recognize you so we can kind of keep it orderly here. Andy, I see you raised a question. Please go ahead, Andy Bonner.
Well, I see that it's not only just Mr. Jones himself, but also the firm Jones and Associates that's asking for reinstatement here. Given that fact, the question is that with the sign up, even though there are other CPAs within the office, were they holding themselves out to be separate or, distinctive? And I think he said yes, they were, but the sign specifically said Jones and Associates CPA. Is that what it said on the doors?
It did. Yes, it said certified public accountant. Yeah.
And so so when they met with you and talked about putting the tape over those signs, what about that was not clear, or was there tape on it and they just happened to see it when there wasn't? Or it seems like that would be in defiance of what was requested.
Mm-hmm. I covered up with white tape on our Gallatin office after meeting with Sherry, with the other two offices. Nashville, honestly didn't think about that one as primarily I work in our Gallatin one. It is a shared signage down in Nashville, and then the only instance in Germantown there is a tiny plaque, and again that is a shared space work office. There's a tiny plaque above a door that said Jones CPA, and again the PA that worked down there has the last name of Jones and is a CPA. So again, honestly, I just didn't think about checking those offices, and was primarily focused on that stuff and trying to do the social media and website and change up the domain name.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And then I see also from Judy Weatherby that you have a question for Mr. Jones. Go ahead, please.
One thing I'm a little unclear about is the opening of the other offices. Were those open? Were they compliant when they were open, or did you open and then seek to get a firm permit?
All offices had active firm permits through 2019 until they were revoked, or my license was revoked in June or July. But all firm permits were active. Memphis was not open until May or June of 2019. We switched that one to a separate LLC and is run and operated by the CPA that works down there. And then, but all the other offices that were active back in 2017 when this incident happened had active firm permits for 17, 18, and 19. All years were renewed, all while this was going on, which again is why, you know, when this happened and my license was revoked actually in 19 and not back in 18.
Thank you.
Maria, can you speak to that? Because I'm looking at the timeline of events, and I just want to make sure that all of this reconciles.
Yeah, Judy, can you just ask your question one more time so I'm clear?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the timeline of events that was part of our package provided. And I mean, I guess I'm not following, because Mr. Jones is indicating that he did have those firm permits and was in compliance at those other locations. So I'm looking at the Germantown permit, for example, and it's basically saying it's unlicensed. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on obtaining firm permits and activities going on while the license was revoked.
Yeah, so for the Germantown location, Judy, this was he applied for a firm permit. Then we saw that his actual personal license was in the revoked status, and so that brought it to the attention of the board. Does that answer your question fully? I'm not sure.
Whenever we applied for Germantown Germantown off, that is when we did it under another LLC operated solely.
Yes,
And so you had no ownership in that firm, or?
No. After the status was brought to our attention, again, the office in Germantown was not active until May or June, same time frame of June, July, whenever my license was revoked.
Also, I'd like to let Sherry comment on this. She's very familiar with the factual history.
Yes, in terms of the Germantown office, and Wendy, if I misstate anything, please chime in. But there was an initial application for Jones and Associates that was denied because Mr. Jones's license was revoked, and then at some point there was another application with the other owner at the Germantown location. So there was an initial application made for Jones and Associates as Brad Jones as one of the owners that was denied by the board. But then a subsequent application came up with where the other owners applied for a firm permit as 100% owner of that location, which took it out of the Jones and Associates PLLC umbrella. In terms of the Memphis and the Nashville and the Gallatin locations, the Nashville location was the firm that was revoked in July, along with the individual license, and the Gallatin firm permit was active through the end of the year and allowed to expire because it could not be renewed because the owner was not an active CPA. Did I misstate anything, Wendy?
No, you did not misstate anything. For clarification, one of the complaints that was opened was related to the operation of the Germantown location without a firm permit. So we did open a complaint because that Germantown location was being advertised on the website. And we subsequently received the application for that location after the complaint was open.
So am I understanding that the Germantown location has nothing to do with Mr. Brad Jones that we're talking with today?
Initially, that Germantown location was being advertised on his website as one of 3 locations that he owned and operated of Jones and Associates CPAs. Since then, they have, in the Memphis location, established a new entity with a properly licensed individual in the Memphis location.
That also has the last name of Jones, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Judy. And I
So
see that I'm going, sorry, go ahead, Judy.
No, go ahead. I just want to make sure I understand that's just kind of a little complicated to me. I'm not sure I understand. Was the firm sold? Does Mr. Brad Jones not have, there's no affiliation, or does he have a minority interest in it, or do we have any of that information?
No, I have no ownership in there. The other individual is actually a family member of mine that holds an active CPA license, who is enrolled in peer review and has all of that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Brad.
Judy, thank you for your question. And Stephen, I see that you also have a question. Please go ahead.
All right, I'm still confused here. So, Mr. Jones, which firm do you own? What location? What town is it in? Is it Gallatin?
Gallatin and an office in Nashville is where, when I started the firm 5 years ago.
Okay, so what is your website now?
It is jones.tax, www.jones.tax.
So if I go into there and click on like contact us or locations, is it going to show only Gallatin and Nashville? Does it have a Germantown location?
It does have a Germantown location.
But you don't have one because you don't own one, correct?
Correct. For peer reviews and attest services, correct. But down there where we're not a firm permit, we do offer tax services and monthly bookkeeping.
Why do you have that location on there if it's not a true location of yours?
Because it will be whenever we get it reinstated.
But it's not as of today, correct?
Correct. I do contract work out to the other individual to help perform bookkeeping and tax services.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any other questions from other board members? If so, please use the chat all function just to let me know you have a question. Judy, go ahead with your follow-up question.
Based on the answers that you provided to Stephen Eldridge, it appears that you do have affiliation and are part of that and will be conducting business from Memphis going forward, or Germantown. Sorry, unless I just
yes,
misheard.
that is the plan. Eventually, whenever the license, like going back to the original firm permit and application, that in turn was denied due to my license being revoked. Again, any of the services being offered, again, do not require any firm permits, as it only is tax preparation and monthly bookkeeping services. But the plan going forward, all active firm permits will be applied for and done. But again, no attest services will be provided by any of those locations.
Okay, so if I looked up on the on the government website, who would own that office? Who would own that location, Germantown?
Under the firm permit, is that what you're referring to?
No. Who owns the shares of that location? Who is the business owner for corporate purposes? Registration with government authorities.
I don't understand where the government registration. There's no one. There's not a separate entity down there besides the other owner that rents out the office down there.
The other owner. So you are an owner there. Is that? I mean, I'm
No,
not
my
sorry.
name.
I'm sorry. I'm
Yes,
very
my
confused.
name. I understand. I just try to understand the question. Originally, I signed a lease to open up a Germantown office. So the lease is under Jones and Associates CPA at the time, because that's what our legal name was. So that is the active lease on there. Since then, I then sublease it out to this other entity for the time being. So the other active CPA that owns 100% of the new firm that I subcontract work down there. If anyone, for tax purposes and monthly bookkeeping, my name is still on the lease of the building, this workspace, because the firm permit got revoked or denied. We started another LLC that then just rents the space from me. So just subleases it.
Okay. So who files the tax return with the funds flowing through there? Where are those revenues reported tax wise?
Under my company.
Okay. All right. That clarifies it for me. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Are there any other board members that have questions for Mr. Jones? If so, please use the chat all function. Mr. Jones, this is Kevin Monroe. One of the concerns I think that I have as a board member is difficulty with allowing for reinstatement when at least some elements of the non-compliance are still ongoing. And so it appears that you've dealt with the social and web advertising or placement of the name of your firm adequately and cooperatively. We've just got 2 or 3 physical locations where it's a matter of literally probably taping over, the CPA designation on those locations as it relates to your firm name to, come into compliance with what the board had asked you to do. And it would appear that could be something that could be pretty readily done. Can you kind of give us a sense of your willingness to do that?
Yeah, no, I'm willing to do whatever needs to be done. I think obviously the whole situation extremely embarrassed about it and want to rectify it. The Germantown sign has already been taken down. The plaque that was above the door has already been taken down when that was brought to our attention. Then also can put some tape on Nashville. But yeah, definitely want to resolve the issue. I think we've all worked extremely hard to earn the CPA designation. So it does mean a lot to me. And definitely don't want to harm the public, and never, that was my intention, and which is why I rectified and made the client whole, and it came out of my pocket before the board even had to intervene. And so again, for an issue that's dating back to 2017, to now be talking about it in 2020, a lot of that my fault. But just want to get this issue resolved and closed and behind me.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. And I see that Janet Booker Davis, another board member, has a question.
Yes, I just wanted to be clear about the attest services, that there are no attest services offered in any of your locations. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and you're not in a peer review, and I guess there's no need to be in a peer review in the peer review program.
No, when we were starting the Memphis or Germantown office, we did file an initial application for a peer review for the full CPA that was brought on board that works down out of our Germantown office. Then once the firm or my license was found out to be revoked, and that's why we started the other LLC that is owned 100% by this other active individual. And any attest services he has done and billed separately, those funds do not come in through my company. All engagement letters, letterhead, all that is done through a separate company. So again, I have no piece, not even a financial relationship to the attest services that were done by the CPA done in our Germantown office.
That was kind of cutting in and out. So you're saying that there are test services done, but it's through another CPA in that office?
Right. When we started in May, or tried opening up our in May of 2019, May or June, we did initially file an application to be enrolled in a peer review. But then that is what also led us to having another LLC set up. And again, no billing goes through my company. So there's no financial ties, and all that is handled by a separate individual entity. I have no involvement, does not go through any of my offices.
Okay, and then I think I saw in the documentation that there was a SARS, 8-hour SARS 21 CPE course that was to be taken. Was that completed?
I did send in the updated SARS 24. There's about 15 hours of that to I believe I gave it to Sherry to pass on, but all the CE was current through 17, 18, and 19 for all years that was in question.
Janet, I would say I concur that he completed the CPE that was required on the consent order. It was after the fact of, I mean, the license was revoked because the consent order had not been complied with, and then post the revocation, then that was proof of completion was provided at that time, as well as the civil penalty that was part of that consent order.
Okay. Thanks, Sherry. Thanks, Mr. Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Any other board members have follow-up questions for Mr. Jones or for legal counsel or Wendy? Yes, go ahead.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Larry.
This is kind of a technicality, I guess, but on the application form, there's a couple of places where it asks for your latest peer review. Like on the affidavit, it said, "Did this firm previously offer a test service?" But that's where this whole started, was he did issue an attest engagement, and then if your answer is yes, you have to say when was the last and your last attest engagement. What was it dated? I'm confused as to why that answer isn't yes, that he did offer a test engagement, because he did one, didn't he?
I did do the one, but in technicality, I rescinded the report and paid another firm to issue a report and all that. So that's why I said no, and no had been done since then. So once it was brought to my attention that I needed to be enrolled in a peer review, and I had not, is why I, again, refunded the client, took back my report, a separate unrelated CPA firm to issue the report on that client's behalf, which I covered the bill for, so they could get their contractor's license. And again, this is just ignorance on my. I took 100% responsibility for that. Again, tried to make the client possible, and so that way there was not any issues, which is why I gave a full refund and came out of my own pocket to pay another CPA firm to issue the report for that client so they could apply for the contractor's license.
So Wendy or Karen, so we're to assume that engagement never happened based on that. So did he answer the question correctly on the form?
I'm fine with the resolution of that, assuming that was the only attest engagement.
Okay.
Larry, thank you for your question. Are there any other further questions by board members? If so, just use the chat all function and let me know, and I'll recognize you. Miss Judy, go ahead. Judy Weatherby.
Based on that last discussion, so just want to make sure I understand. Had you prepared any attest services prior to that one for the contractor license board?
No, I don't believe so. My recognition, because I mean, again, that was the complaint, or that was, I guess, originally filed. It wasn't from the client. It was actually the contractor's licensing board, if I believe. And again, that was 2017. And again, this was just kind of the firm starting. And once I realized we were wrong, yeah, I don't. We did not do any more, and I don't remember submitting one
prior to that.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Kevin, can I ask a follow-up?
Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, a little bit confused on that because you did have a peer review, right? Didn't you pay a firm to do a peer review?
No, I've never gone or paid for a peer review. We
Okay,
did apply for a the peer enrollment. We tried doing that May or June of 2019 when we were trying to open up the Germantown office with the CP. Years of public auditing practice, but then once we just go, we did not.
Okay.
Thank you, Larry. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Jones? I don't see any coming through the chat all function. And I guess what I would like to propose as a motion with respect to this matter is I would move that we reinstate the licenses of Mr. Jones and Jones and Associates CPA PLLC, subject to satisfactory presentation of proof to the staff that the remaining physical CPA designations on the two office locations are taped over or in some appropriate way removed.
Kevin, you may also wish to discuss continuing education because the license has been in a revoked status. We did not have proof of continuing education for the 18-19 period.
Okay, and I'll add that as a stipulation that proof of CPE for the 18-19 period be provided as well. So to kind of recap, I'm moving for reinstatement subject to the submission of proof of compliance of the CPA designation removal on the remaining physical locations where it exists, and subject to offering proof of CPE compliance during the period. Is there
Andy, I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second from Andy Bonner. And so now we'll open that motion up for discussion. Trey, go ahead.
So I just want to be clear on your motion here, because are we basically saying that the CPE is a valid issue that Wendy just brought up? I'm curious, we're talking about him removing his CPA designation, and then we're going to allow him to be reinstated right after that?
Either removing or covering up the CPA designation is what I had in mind. And then once he complies with that, and once he provides the appropriate CPE documentation, then he would be authorized to be reinstated. That's what I had in mind, Trey.
Okay. I just felt like if we're going to reinstate the license, I mean, he's going to take a picture of tape over the CPA and then send that back to our staff, and then all of a sudden he's back and reinstated and can remove the tape. So I was just thinking, well, okay, we're going to reinstate. Are we going to reinstate the CPE? I agree with. We need to make sure he's up to date on CPE. But anyway, I'm good either way. I was just curious about that.
Okay, thanks, Trey. And Judy, I see you also have a question.
Yeah, mine was right along the same line as Trey. If we reinstate here, wouldn't he be allowed to use the signage, or does that relate to the actual firm permit needing to be approved as well?
So I
Is it
think
just a matter of we reinstate and then you uncover the sign? That's what I don't understand.
yes, I think in my mind, in my view, we could have avoided this part of the discussion if the signage issues had been taken care of before this reinstatement hearing. They've not been, and there's a piece of me that says, you still need to comply with that, even if it's only for a short period of time, to demonstrate that you've complied with the consent order that you signed. And so, to clarify, the reinstatement motion would apply both to his individual license and the Jones and Associates CPA PLLC firm permit.
Okay, thank you.
Brad, this is Kevin. We were having trouble hearing that last response. If you could try to repeat. Thank you, Brad. What I heard was you're happy to do whatever needs to be done. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And I see a question from Janet Booker Davis.
Hey, Kevin, sorry. Can I just jump in here? Can everyone go ahead and disable their video, because it's causing a lot of problems with the recording. I think it's taking up a lot of bandwidth. And it'll still show your name when you're speaking. So if you're on video right now, please go ahead and disable that.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. And then Janet Booker Davis, I believe you had a question.
Yes, okay. So I think Kevin's motion was to keep the signage covered up until all of the, I guess we have evidence that all of the requirements have been met, including the CPE. So how long, Brad, or maybe you've already completed the CPE? Maybe I'll just ask, what is the status of the CPE?
Yeah, all the CPE has been completed. I mean, normal informed to me that possibly I'd have to do some additional besides the normal 80 hours. Again, but I have the 80 hours over that 2-year time period for 18 and 19.
Okay, so Kevin, is that the motion that once, I guess, the CPE is completed, then the covering up the signage is taken care of, and he could remove any coverage over the signage?
In my view, what I was envisioning would be that he would remove or cover up the signage until his individual and firm license are reinstated. And they're going to be reinstated upon the time that he submits proof of his CPE during that period, and that he ideally submits, evidence that the signage indeed was covered up. And then as soon as he's reinstated, and maybe this is just going through the motions, he can, if he's fully reinstated, he can remove the covering up of the signage and try to maintain an active license in good standing as an individual and as a firm.
Okay, thanks.
And then I see that Sherry Wall has a comment. Go ahead, Sherry.
Just regarding the CPE, and it's been a few months, but Wendy and Karen might chime in on this as well. I think some of the CPE that was completed in that 18-19 time period was used to satisfy a CPE audit from a previous year as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. So there might be when Mr. Jones says that he's completed the adequate CPE for the 18-19 period, it may have been used to satisfy the previous CPE period. Please, Wendy, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong.
So, Sherry, I would have to look into that, but we can certainly, we would have that record of that information so that when he submits the CPE, we can certainly decipher between what would be acceptable and what would not based on a prior audit.
That sounds good. I just wanted to make sure the board was aware that there might be a little bit of a wrinkle there.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Other comments or discussion on the motion from members of the board? I don't see any coming through, and so just to recap, the motion on the table is to move for reinstatement of Brad Jones' individual license and the Jones and Associates CPA PLLC firm permits upon presentation of appropriate evidence to the board of satisfactory completion of the required CPE from the 2018-19 period, and on providing documentation or evidentiary matter with respect to the signage being taken care of up until the time that reinstatement is granted. Any further comment or discussion? If not, Karen, will you go ahead and call the roll on that motion?
Kevin, this is Maria.
Maria?
I'm sorry, I'm just being overly cautious on our motions. Do we have a second for your motion?
Yes, Andy Bonner seconded.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to double check.
Okay.
Thank you.
Karen, will you go ahead and call the roll on that motion?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
No.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
Monroe,
Aye.
Jamie Moon,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby, aye.
Okay, thank you, Karen. That motion passes. And Mr. Jones, thank you for participating in this morning's reinstatement discussion and presentation. I think it's clear based on your comments and on what the board and staff have indicated what needs to be done. And my counsel would be to just coordinate with the staff, particularly on seeing that the CPE matters are completely taken care of and that the signage is taken care of. And once that is resolved, we look forward to you moving forward as an active licensee in good standing.
Great. So much. Every one of you, I really, really do appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, and appreciate it most by getting into compliance and staying there. So we appreciate that, Mr.
Right.
Jones. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. We're going to go ahead and proceed, Wendy, with the executive director's report.
All right. This document was sent to you all about a week ago. So just giving you kind of a second to open that up and take a look. The first item on the director's report is typically future meeting dates. And so we have those listed there with a proposed date of Tuesday, July 27th, 2021. That is the only one that we'll need approval on later at the end of the director's report. If anybody has questions about that, just let me know at some point. Related to NASBA meetings, of course, all travel has been canceled due to the COVID-19 situation. And so the NASBA regional meetings are being held virtually this year. I've listed there the Eastern Regional to be held June 10th through 11th. There are probably dates for the Western if those dates don't work for you, but this meeting is going to be open to everybody. So if you have some time on your calendar, I think it would be, there'd be some good sessions to attend there. They'll be talking about CPA evolution, among other things that are top of mind within the profession these days. The annual meeting is still scheduled for November 1st through the 4th in San Diego. However, we'll just keep our eye on that, on whether they continue to plan for travel for that particular meeting. Right now, travel for anyone in the state of Tennessee government is prohibited, so that ban would have to be lifted to allow us to attend. COVID-19 related concerns. We did create a resource page on our website to cover the issues that we saw coming in. Really, we've not had a whole lot. Most of it has been around the candidate side of things, and we'll discuss that more in a few minutes. We did send an email out to licensees on April 13, highlighting this information and directing folks to the page that we had created on our website for up-to-date information. So related to the exam, this is, of course, is where we've seen the most flurry of activity. Testing centers were closed beginning March 17th through April 30th. Limited testing did start back on May 1st, last Friday, based on your local authority and, of course, implementing social distancing recommendations. Some centers and some locales are remaining closed. It's my understanding that the testing centers in Tennessee are all open with limited capacity to make sure they're complying with social distancing recommendations. Those with NTSs expiring on or before June 30 have been extended to September 30. We do expect to extend those further, and I will get into that a little later when we talk about licensing related items. There's been an emergency testing period established between, typically testing would be closed off after June 10th for our last dark period, but they are going to keep it open from June 10th to June 30th to allow for as much testing as possible. And then, of course, the day we've been waiting for, continuous testing, starts July 1st, and we abandon the window concept beginning on that date. And so the current situation is not affecting that. We do plan to move forward. There are a few states in the country that are not able to move forward, but those have been readily communicated on our website and in other places, and it's just a few. Exam results attached to the director's report is the 2020 Q1 CPA exam results for Tennessee. I believe we were down about 25 individuals compared to the same period last year. Other than that, we're pretty on par with the same period last year. Fee letter. Occasionally, fees need to be increased according to the contract for the CPA exam for candidate fees. In this particular communication, you'll see that NASBA and the AICPA will be instituting some price increases. Cost of living adjustments is basically what those are, and those will begin at towards the end of this year. I believe for our state it's around October that those fee increases will take place. The Elijah Watt Sells Award, this is the award that is given by the AICPA to CPA candidates who have attained a cumulative average score of 95.5 across all four sections of the exam, passed all four sections of the exam on the first attempt, and completed testing in 2019. So we had four award winners in Tennessee this year, and so I have those listed in the report. I will read them on the record, so anyone who's listening will hear that. Mary Hagan, a graduate of MTSU with a bachelor's in accounting, is employed with the Tennessee Comptroller of the Treasury in Nashville, Tennessee. Ryan Lynch is a graduate of ETSU with a Bachelor of Science in Finance and Accounting and is employed with Crow in Knoxville, Tennessee. Grant Ramey, a graduate of Rhodes College with a Bachelor's in Economics Business and a Master's in Accounting, is employed with EY in the Cincinnati, Ohio area. And Connor Shannon, a graduate of Arkansas State University with a Bachelor of Science in Accounting and Master's in Accounting, is employed by Reynolds, Bone & Griesbeck in Memphis, Tennessee. So congratulations to those four. That's an excellent achievement.
Wendy, this is Kevin. I think we also need to congratulate Pam Church here. I'm sure she had a hand in the program that Grant graduated from. So Pam, congrats to you.
I was trying to hold back, but we are so proud of Grant. Of course, he's brilliant and diligent, but he's been very kind about his remarks about the program. So congratulations to him and to all of them.
And to you and your colleagues. Thanks so much, Pam.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to continuing as education. So in the continuing education world, there are some states that have reporting periods June 30. Some of those states have offered extensions for completing continuing education. Some have not. The NASBA is keeping a really good list of those various state requirements and extensions. So if anyone needs those, they can always reach out to our office. It is also available, I believe, on NASBA's website. One of the things that we've been working through is that group live sponsors that are registered with NASBA are requesting to cancel those live events and move to group internet-based events. Typically what would happen if a sponsor wanted to move to that group internet-based type delivery method, they would be required to apply again with NASBA and add that as a delivery method and go through the application process. In the times that we're in right now, NASBA doesn't have the ability to rapidly approve those types of things. So they are offering some flexibility and allowing these folks to that want to do the group internet-based to allow that without, as long as the state board allows it, and allowing flexibility in this area and allowing these groups to follow the standards and provide the instructor that's required, the interaction that's required, and then on the certificates, they would list a disclaimer that it was offered in a group internet-based delivery method due to COVID-19. So as a board, we have worked with legal, and there is nothing specific in our rules that requires approval of this or disallows this. Our rules require that sponsors be registered with NASBA unless you're exempt, and therefore we expect those sponsors to comply with NASBA. So as long as they're offering the flexibility, we will offer the flexibility as well. Right now, we are looking to offer the flexibility through September, but may look to offer that towards the end of the year if necessary. We have encouraged folks that plan to offer things after September or later in the year to go ahead and apply for that additional delivery method. So that is something that's still being discussed. If anybody has any comments on that or suggestions, feel free to make a comment here or let me know later. The next item is financials. Typically, we talk about this in the executive committee, but I am including them at the end of this report. And I will just highlight a few things on that document. And if you all have questions, you can let me know. As of right now, we are doing good with our revenue. We are actually up now 2% this year, which there was a concern at the last meeting. We were significantly behind because we saw a slowdown in renewals to what we believe was the folks who needed to submit their continuing education with their renewal were a little bit delayed in doing that because they were having to list out those courses under our new requirements. So we have caught up in that arena and actually are seeing now an increase in our revenues for the year. Another couple of things on the revenue side, we do have roughly 200 more odd licenses than even, so the population's a little bit larger in this past renewal season. Our case and complaint revenue is up about 10%. Of course, we don't budget for case and complaint, but that is a reality of our revenue numbers. We also issued 18 additional new licenses in the first quarter compared to the same period last year. And then finally, we saw more folks renew after the penalty was assessed on January 31st. And so we saw some additional revenue with that penalty being assessed. So I believe that those factors together contributed to our increase in revenue to date. So the regulatory fee is down quite significantly. I am going to look at March numbers just to make sure that this wasn't behind for some reason. If it doesn't catch up, I'm going to look into those numbers. It shouldn't be down quite that much, given the fact that our renewals are not behind by the same amount. So the other areas to highlight, we are seeing an increase in salaries and employee benefits. Some of the raises and pay for performance bonuses were higher this year than we had expected. We also had a staff member on maternity leave last year for a few months, and so we are ahead of last year in those particular numbers. We've also had some employees change their healthcare allotments on the employee benefit side, so there's an increase there as well. On the travel side, of course, we will see no additional travel expense this year, so we will probably save $15,000 to $20,000 in that line item. Communications and shipping is running quite a bit lower than last year, so I am actually going to look into some of our mailings during renewals to see if there's anything there that is contributing to that. Employee training, of course, the NASBA registration fees are included there, so we are seeing that down a bit and don't expect any additional fees there because we will not be traveling and seeing those expenses from NASBA. Under computer-related items, we are seeing a fee there or an expense there that we did not see last year. Our Zendesk platform encompasses that entire line item right now, and that is our customer service platform where we take our tickets in and our calls in and respond to those and track our customer service related tasks. So that fee was $37.44. We don't, there has been a freeze on buying new equipment and that type of thing, so I don't expect any increases there. And state professional services is quite a bit down. Rent savings is outpacing any expected increase in our IT costs, so we are seeing a good amount of savings there. Our legal, from a cost back standpoint, our legal cost has stabilized, and our assistant commissioner office cost backs are down roughly 30%. I still expect that some of those are behind, so we may see that catch up here soon. So anyway, our total revenues, $928,930, less our expenditures, $595,690, leave us on the plus side at $333,240 as of a February 20 period ending. Of course, our fiscal year ends June 30. So I do feel as though we're in a comfortable spot with that. So that covers the financials. So let me get back to my spot on the director's report.
Wendy, one thing there, Larry just mentioned that he has a question for you on travel.
Sure.
Hey, Wendy, can you hear me?
I can.
On the travel narrative there, you say that it includes the annual meeting last year and then travel for one board member to the Eastern Regional. My first question is, why was it only one? Because there were several of us that went, but wouldn't that have been paid in June of 19 and last year?
So sometimes with that regional meeting, it just depends on when we get those expenses submitted and paid.
Okay,
And
so it depends on when the particular board member turns in their expenses.
Correct. So it looks as if everyone else was we were able to get that in the prior fiscal year, and one person we were not able to, so it fell to the next fiscal year.
Okay, I understand.
What was did you have a second question?
No, that was all. Thank you.
Okay. Stephen Eldridge had an additional question. Stephen?
Hey, Wendy, this is about exam fees. I was just looking at the numbers and I noticed that, the AICPA is proposing increasing their fees by 10% and NASBA's by 25%. And I looked at Prometric and their fee increase is only 48 cents. Something seems out of line there, but my question really is, and I don't know if we have any say in this or not, but I mean, we're in some economic uncertainty right now, and businesses are struggling to stay open, and it's tough. And when I see somebody going and raising their fees 25%, 10% respectively, to me, I would just like to ask them to consider potentially postponing that until we get some more certainty back in the economy, especially since Prometric's cost of living is only 48 cents.
I do believe that Prometric has had, so it's been a while since NASBA and AICPA have increased their fees, where Prometric has had some fee increases along the way where NASBA and AICPA have not. But I will certainly relay the information. I'm not sure the board has a lot of say in that because I think some of this is in the contract, but I will certainly relay that information.
Say as a service to the members of our CPA community and potential CPAs. It'd be a nice gesture, especially in these times.
Right. And the Prometric fee is per hour. So for each exam, that's times 4.
Okay, so $2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on that? Okay. I will jump back to our open complaint inventory. And I provided this at the last meeting. It's the last page on the director's report. And this basically gives you a look at the complaints that we have in inventory that are not on your legal report today, so that they are somewhere else in the process. And so if you look at the document, the first 4 on the first section is your individuals and the second section is your firms. Those that are not highlighted have recently been received by the department. We are collecting responses and then forwarding those to the legal team for review. So they are very new to the system. Those that are highlighted in green are those that the board has authorized some type of discipline. And typically we're either waiting on them to sign the consent order, or they have acknowledged that they're not going to sign the consent order, they're not going to agree, and they're going to go to, they would like to go to a hearing. And so we did have a hearing scheduled for this meeting today, but have continued that till July. So do expect that we will have at least one hearing at the July meeting if we're able to meet in person. And then you get down to the coral section, I guess might be the best way. I don't know what that color really is, but we have a payment plan status. These are folks that have signed their consent order and they have some type of follow-up action that they have to do. So they have a peer review that's due, they have continuing education that's due, or they simply wanted to spread out their civil penalty in a payment plan where they're paying a little bit each month. And so we monitor those that are in payment plan status. And then those that are in litigation monitoring are those where there is litigation or investigation of some sort being done by another entity. So we have chosen to put a hold on those until that other litigation or investigation is concluded. And so I think we're looking really good on our complaint inventory. We are less than we have been in a while on these, and so I think kudos to the legal team for working through these and keeping on top of them.
Wendy, this is Kevin. Just thank you for including this as part of the executive director's report. I think it's responsive to, I think, a couple of questions at earlier meetings that board members had asked to kind of say, well, what else is out there? And this is directly responsive to that. So appreciate you including that in the report.
You're welcome. Any other questions? We do have, as you'll notice, there are some folks that we probably have at least a handful where a hearing is likely. So just keep that in mind. All right, and then back to board appointments. The board appointments are currently on hold due to COVID-19. Those particular staff members in the governor's office have been diverted to other activities. And so those that are board members that are expiring June 30, we may or may not see appointments made by that deadline. So we just graciously ask you to continue to serve until advised otherwise. Renewals, this is just a quick update on where we are on renewals. This gives you a sense that we did catch up in our renewals, and this is as of April 24th of this year. We had 7,491 individual licenses renewed, which is just one individual behind last year. As I mentioned earlier, we do have 200 plus additional odd licensees, so we have a little bit of a larger pool. Therefore, we do have more in the expired grace category than we did at the same time last year. These are just folks that have not renewed yet and need to complete their continuing education or pay their professional privilege tax from last year or something of that nature. So I believe that Laura has about 35 pending in her inbox of folks that have to do one of those two things. They either need to complete continuing education or get their professional privilege tax rectified. And then, of course, on the firm side, we are well in line with prior years, actually ahead of last year on the expired grace side with only 36 firms still to renew. Performance metrics, this talks about where we are in our number of days to license and license initial licensees, as well as our case and complaint performance metrics, where we are, our goal is to resolve 90% of cases within 180 days, and shows you where we are on that. So we had a pretty good March, although I will say our applications were down a bit in March. It is typically a slow month for us. I think we were somewhere between 35 and 40 initial applications, which is a slow time of the year for us. new licenses issued. You will see there that overall, though, in the first quarter, we did issue 145 new individual license versus the same time period last year, we issued 127, so that's good news. We were also double the number of firm permits requested during that same time period. And then at the end of the report, just gives you the general licensing overall population as number of licensees. So we currently stand at 11,249 active licensees and 1,832 active firm permits. And Mr. Chairman, I believe that concludes my comments on the director's report. If you have any questions, happy to take those.
Okay, any questions for Wendy on that? And we will have one action item coming out of that, which is to approve the future meeting date on Tuesday, July 27th, 2021. But before we get to that, are there any other questions that board members have for Wendy on the executive director's report? I'm not seeing any come through the chat line, so let's go ahead and deal with the future meeting date action. Is there a motion to approve the recommended future meeting date of Tuesday, July 27th, 2021 as the proposed regular quarterly meeting for that period?
So moved.
I will make the motion.
This is Larry. I'll make the second.
Okay, so we've got a second by Larry. I caught that, and I'm sorry, was it Andy that made the motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any comment or discussion? If not, Karen, will you please call the roll on the motion to add the Tuesday, July 27th, 2021 meeting date to the schedule?
Yes, sir. Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Osborne,
Aye.
Fred Gilbert,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Gabe Moon,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby. Aye.
Thank you, Karen. The motion passes, and just saw a note from Stephen Eldridge that he has a question.
I feel pretty strongly about this, and I don't know if this is appropriate time or if we can do it, but I mean, I would like to make a motion now, if I can, just to have a formal correspondence from our board to NASBA, Prometrics, and AICPA, asking them to consider at least postponing their fee increase for at least 12 months.
Stephen, could I suggest that we go ahead and put that motion in when we get to the new and old business section of the agenda?
That's fine. I didn't know what the appropriate time was, so I'll hold that till new business if that's okay.
That would be great. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks.
The next item on the agenda is our licensing related requests, and we're kind of getting to the section of the agenda where we would normally have worked through our committee meetings if we had committees that were meeting during this period. And so what I've asked the relevant committee chairs to do is to go ahead and kind of lead the entire board through the discussion that they would normally have as a committee on these items. However, when we actually turn to vote on any items that require action, we will not vote as committees. We will vote as an entire board. And so all board members will have a chance to ask questions after the presentations and to participate in discussion. And then we will vote as a board with respect to the action items here for anything required under licensing related requests, continuing education, and our usual legal report. And again, just as a reminder, if you have a question, if you can just use the chat all function, I'll see that, and then I'll just recognize them in the order that they pop up. And so we'll turn to licensing related requests. And Gay, I think you and your committee have the heavy lifting on some of these issues, thanks to COVID-19 and just the normal scope of business. And I'll turn things over to you, Gay.
Thank you, Kevin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. The first thing we have up is kind of a rule on exam credit extensions as related to COVID-19. Wendy brought this up in her executive report. And without having us go through so many extension requests, NASPA has already made the recommendation of any credits that expire between April and June to get an automatic extension through September 30. And the board has the right, pursuant to rule number 0020-01-.06, 6 in parentheses, C in parentheses, we have the right to grant an extension. And like I said, NASPA has made this recommendation. The testing centers were closed from March 17th through April 30. So that eliminated the potential for people to get their testing in. Not all, well, I think maybe some, but I don't know if Davidson County testing centers may not be open because Davidson County is still shut down. But there's going to be limited seating. Some testing centers may not be open. People who have compromised health issues may be much more hesitant to sit for the exam. So I think we ought to follow NASPA's recommendation. And frankly, our next meeting is in July, which, by that time, we don't know exactly what COVID is going to do, and to maybe alleviate some of the stress that potential licensees are going through during this time period, I would consider extending those that expire between April and September and allowing an extension of time through December 31. So I would open it up to discussion for this. I think NASPA is meeting on maybe delaying the September 30 extension period to December, but I don't know. Wendy, have you heard any more on that?
Yes, Pam's group, Pam is part of the computer-based testing committee with NASBA, and they met yesterday. So maybe we could let Pam give us some insight on those discussions yesterday.
Okay. Yes, NASBA is planning to put out a communication to all of the executive directors and ask for response by Friday. Based on what they had already considered and what the committee said, they will be recommending that for both credit extensions and notices to schedule, that anyone with a date between April 1st and December 30th would automatically be extended until December 31st. They can only make recommendations, they cannot require, but I guess you saw the spreadsheet that Wendy sent out. The states are all over the place. And this is going to be so confusing, I think, and I think lead to perceptions of inequities from the perspective of students is what I'm thinking, because some of them sit in one state, transfer their license to another, they may go to school in one state and work in another. So the more uniformity we can have, I think, the better this will be. They also, several people mentioned that smaller states may just say, we will consider each case individually. But I think that's feasible for a smaller state. I think for a state like ours, it would be very difficult. And even if we went to that effort in the sense of utmost concern, I think it would be hard to maintain equity across all situations. So anyway, that was my opinion, but that's what the committee said. They also pointed out that Prometrics is planning to extend their daily hours very soon because of the demand with the limited seating, etc. And several people pointed out that even after everything's totally reopened, that there will be a lot of pent-up demand from other professions, such as architecture, where people are not able to sit right now because their professions are not labeled essential. So Wendy, I think that is the summary.
Okay. Yes, I would be, just to give you a flavor of the questions and concerns coming in, is that the tech centers did reopen on Friday. However, many candidates are finding it hard to locate a date to sit before August. And so there's a pretty extensive period of time here where folks have just not been able to sit, and increases the anxiety among candidates. So I know the original recommendation was those that had credits expiring in June would be granted 90 days until September, but I would agree with the discussions yesterday and the thoughts of Gay that anyone with credits expiring really for Tennessee would be June and September, that all of those be extended until 12/31, and that would give us some breathing room for about 5 months and reduce the anxiety for these folks along the way. These credit extensions, we have routinely required the board to make the decision. I have not been involved in that, and so that's why we're talking about this today. Does that help in an explanation?
Wendy, are you proposing a shorter period of time than NASBA recommended? I'm just trying to clarify. You said.
I don't think so. So if you want to restate what their recommendation was.
They said anyone with a date of April 1st to December 30th would be extended to December 31st.
That's fine. I'm happy with that language. My purpose was the same as theirs. Yes.
And I'm in agreement with that, Pam, because I think we just don't know enough. And if they can't get seats in the testing centers, I mean, it's everybody's anxious enough right now. And to know that automatically that they have until December 31st, I think that would really help a lot of people. And I think it would eliminate a lot of requests coming to this board for an extension.
Thank you, Gay. I see that Stephen Eldridge has a question.
I think mine was answered. I think it's a great idea to extend it to December 31st, but I thought NASBA's was anybody expiring through June 30th would get a 90-day extension.
Stephen, that was the original recommendation that was given to us about a month ago. Of course, this board hasn't met, and really in the past week since testing centers reopened, there's been a flurry of activity around further extensions, and so I apologize. A lot's happened in the past week.
Oh yeah, so there's I just want ours to be consistent with theirs to add, so we don't add to the confusion of other states. So I'm fine with that.
Thank you, Stephen. And I see that Larry Elmore has a question.
Yeah, I have a question on the, what I'm hearing is that it would start on April 1st, any expirations April 1st, but if you look at a lot of the requests that we have today relate to people that expired March 31st. So why is the suggested date April 1st when actually a lot of these issues related to the virus started in March? And so wouldn't you consider going back to earlier than April 1st?
So, Larry, my understanding, the reason that they're not going prior to April 1st is because the last testing date of the first quarter was March 10th, which was before testing centers closed. And so it was felt that that was technically before the crisis. And that's why we have 4 extensions that we're going to be discussing separately, because they don't exactly fall. Well, actually, depending on your decision here, we may not need to talk about the 4th one, but 3 of them definitely fall prior to the crisis per se.
Yeah, I was thinking that, and I think we've all kind of lost touch of days and what date things happen, but I was thinking that the stay-at-home orders at the national level, didn't they start prior to April 1st?
I think now they started on March 17th, March 16th or 17th.
And keep in mind, you couldn't be testing during that time. So the last day of testing, because that was a dark month, I guess. So the last date that you could test was March 10th.
Okay, I see. So March 10th to March 31st wouldn't matter anyway.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any other questions on this topic?
Well, Kevin, is it appropriate for me to make a motion?
Absolutely.
Okay. I would like to make a motion that we extend the credit dates from anything that expires from April 1 through December 30 to make it all go through December 31.
I'll second that. This is Stephen.
We've got a motion by Gay and a second by Stephen. Is there any further comment or discussion on the motion? Karen, will you please call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Davis,
Aye.
Pamela Church, Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Larry Elmore,
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Jay Moon,
Aye.
Trey Watkins,
Aye.
Gigi Weatherby. Aye.
Okay, thank you, Karen. The motion passes. And I think, Gay, we're ready to move on to the individual credit extension requests. And with the motion we've passed, it may be that we no longer need to deal with the Weaver request time-wise.
That is correct.
So we will just have the 3 individual requests we'll need to work through.
Okay. The first one is Chris King. He, bless his heart, in December, he signed up for the, BEC for December 9th. And after conversations with his work buddies and all, they were all taking it on the 10th. And for some reason, he showed up on the 10th and not the 9th. So he did not have a test to sit for and lost a part audit. And then he did sign up for BEC 10 days later, in which he passed this test. So he has requested a 10-day extension so that he does not lose audit. This was his oversight, but I think some of the things we need to consider is he may not be able to, if we don't, he may not be able to get his time to sit for audit. And then that could jeopardize losing regulation. So I don't know if anybody has a big heart for this, but let's talk about it.
Okay, I see that Larry Elmore has a comment on this one.
Yeah, I feel for this guy, and in the end, I think we should approve this. But the only comment I have is that we have the power to grant these extensions if it's in our opinion that the circumstances were beyond the candidate's control. And I'm just asking legal if, I don't know that I don't know that this was beyond his control. He just got confused on his test date. But like I say, in the end, I think we should approve this one. I'm just asking legal if that's okay.
This is Maria. I believe that's within your discretion to approve that as a board.
Okay.
Larry, and I see that Judy Weatherby also has a question.
I feel for this guy, truly. But my only concern would be, are we setting a precedent so that, I don't want everybody coming to us saying, oh, I got mixed up on my date, and then we're expected to then, grant them an exception to the rule. I don't know. Does anybody else have any feelings on that? And Maria, do you see any, would it be within our capacity to just pick and choose, or would we have any problems of setting a precedent?
This is Maria, and I'll just say before I don't know if anyone has any concerns, but it seems like a very specific set of facts, and it's a day that he missed, and just because of that, I think it'd be hard to. You want to, and it's up to the board to decide whether or not they believe in this person's story and want to grant their request. But we certainly hope that people wouldn't take advantage of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any reservations about, recommending you guys do this. But again, it's up to your discretion that whether or not you believe the facts presented and that kind of thing.
And do we have any kind of proof of any of that, or is it just a letter? I'm sorry, I don't have that pulled up.
That's okay, Judy. This is Wendy. He initially indicated he was going to try to get an affidavit from one of his coworkers to kind of attest to this whole situation that occurred. And he emailed me yesterday, and unfortunately, he said he was unable to do that. With all of the pandemic situation, he has been laid off, and he was not able to gain access to this email that he had sent me, and spent some time trying to get that communication so that he could get back in touch with me. And he just apologized. He was unable to get those that affidavit squared away, but was polite and asked me just to touch base with him on his personal email once the board had made a decision.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Judy. And Wendy,
Judy, this is Maria.
I'm sorry, I see that Greg Gilbert has a question.
Actually, a comment, Kevin. I think in response to Judy's question about documentation, though, we do have the scores, which indicated that he had a passing grade on 2020.
Yes, that is true. And as I initially read through this in my own mind, I thought, well, this was under his control. He could have showed up on the right date. The problem that I have is that he did subsequently pass all 4 parts. He has demonstrated that he can pass the exam. And Wendy, I think as you alluded to earlier, given the uncertainties and the seating competition at the Prometric testing labs, it could really be an interesting hardship for him to, find a seating period. And particularly when other people are trying to find seating periods when there are fewer slots. I guess the way I would rationalize it in my own view is, this will then, if we approve this, it leaves a slot for someone else that needs it when he's demonstrated that he's passed it. And normally, if we weren't in a pandemic and he could sit for the exam, I might feel otherwise. But given the circumstances of this one, I really have some sympathy for the requested extension. Other comments or questions?
Kevin, I don't know if it's appropriate, but I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we approve this request.
Okay. Larry, we have a motion to approve the requested extension. Is there a second?
This is Gay. I will second that.
We have a second from McGay Moon. Thank you both. Is there any further comment or discussion before we call the question and vote?
I had a question before that, but I guess I can ask it now.
Sure.
I know we've got a motion on the floor, but could we not grant conditional, can we not grant Wendy the authority to approve this once he's shown proof of the affidavit from his coworker, whatever time it is, I mean, if he's got proof, he's going to get it taken care of and sent to us. I just have a problem with just kind of basing it on hearsay from a letter. I mean, that's my only issue. I mean, it's kind of a dog ate my testing ticket. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy because he's done exactly what he needs to do, but I think we need to have some documentation he said have in his presentation, have that affidavit. If he shows it, I think then grant Wendy the authority to approve his license.
Yeah, Stephen, given the circumstances that they described about his having been laid off and no longer having access to his work computer and the like, I'm not sure how feasible that is.
I mean, I'm assuming he's probably furloughed and he would probably have access at some point, or he could get HR to probably get it for him. I don't care. I'm not going to make a big deal about it because he's done what he needs to do. I just have a problem granting somebody this just based on hearsay.
Kevin, this is Gay.
Yes.
My suggestion is we're granting this extension really out of concern for the current the COVID-19 situation, and the fact that he may not be able to get a testing date to take audit all over again. I mean, that's the only reason. You know, if we were under normal circumstances, probably wouldn't feel this way. But you know, when we lay off people in our office, they are cut off. They do not have access to anything. And because all employees are remote, I can certainly understand how it would be difficult for him to come up with that email. And then by the time he does, he may not even be able to get a testing date, you know, if it just could not happen.
I'm not going to debate this at all. I mean, I hear you, and I agree that it's a terrible situation. I just don't. I mean, if I had an employee that called me that was on furlough, I would say we can have it to you in probably 30 minutes. But I don't care. I'm not going to debate it. I'm going to leave that alone, and I'll go back on mute.
Any other comments or questions before we have a vote? Karen, will you please go ahead and call the roll on the motion to grant the requested credit extension time limit for Chris King?
Anthony Bonner.
Aye.
Jennifer Davis. Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Dave Newton.
Aye.
Trey Watson.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby. Aye.
Thank you, Karen. The motion passes, and we'll move on to the next credit extension request. Gay?
Okay, the next one is Katie Dant. She had her audit, she is asking for her audit exam score, which was expiring on March 31st for an extension. She got pregnant and had her baby in October 2019. Having the baby and working was a little more than she had anticipated, which all can kind of understand that. But she lacks reg, and she has registered for that. She has a seating on June 29th. So she is just asking, this will be her last part to pass. And she is just asking, because of the baby and not being able to get in the reg section before March 31st, she's asking for an extension. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Any comments or questions for Gay or staff on this one?
I think if the board is inclined to grant the extension, we're just going to need a date by which we would extend that audit score to. So she's scheduled to take reg on 6/29. Do we extend it simply to June 30 or for some longer period of time?
So Wendy, if we extend this to June 30, does that get wrapped up in the extension for December 31st as well?
You know, Gay, I don't know for sure. If it might be a timing situation, meaning if it's extended in their system tomorrow, and then they, do a mass extension, she may get the extra time. I'm just not sure the details of how that works.
Yeah, this is Larry. I'm just thinking back to previous extension requests that we've had in the past. I don't remember us doing much about pregnancies or babies unless there were other extenuating circumstances. This one doesn't fall within the, the virus period of time, but I think if we open the door to pregnancies and newborn babies, we're going to have a lot of these.
She didn't give us any comments about if the baby was sick a lot, or I don't think we have anything about that other than it just took working full time, studying, and then having a newborn. She hadn't counted on how much time it was going to take.
Yeah, here again, I'm sympathetic to her problem, but in the past, I think if a person had a child and there were complications or something like that, I think we've considered that. But the workload has never, as far as I can remember, workload has never been considered. And I don't think that newborn babies have, unless there's been extenuating circumstances, but I may be wrong.
This is Janet.
Larry, I think on the, go ahead, Janet. And then Pam also has a comment. So Janet, go ahead.
Do we know if this was a first baby for her?
I do not know, but I would suspect, given the fact that she did not really understand how much time it would take, right, that it was her first.
Well, yeah, that was my impression as well. So.
And Pam, I think you had a comment.
Well, and I'm not sure I have a recommendation, just an observation. I was reading over her letter. She knew throughout 2019 that she needed this part of the exam, so chose not to take it while pregnant. Certainly many people take the exam while pregnant. I'm sympathetic, and I'm glad that our society has moved forward in granting longer maternity leaves, etc. at Rhodes. People pretty much get a whole semester off, but that's toward the end of or after the pregnancy. She did have the entire year before then to take it. So I think that's a significant factor, but I do have mixed feelings.
Pam, any other questions or comments? On this one, Gay, I guess maybe the way to proceed is if you'd care to make a motion. I think if we do nothing, there is no extension that would be granted. So if you're of a mind to offer a motion to grant an extension, let's go ahead and have that, and then we can second it and discuss and then vote on it one way or the other. On the other hand, if there's not a sentiment to offer that motion, then the extension simply would not be granted.
You know, I'll put it out there. I'll just make a motion that we extend the March 31st to June 30.
Okay, so we have a motion to do that. Is there a second?
This is Janet. I'll second.
Janet, thank you for seconding that. So now we have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment or discussion?
I'll make another comment. I think we need to consider what this will mean for other pregnant people and why we are specifically accepting this one. What is different about this one that would not be true of all pregnant people?
Thank you, Pam. And I see that Andy has a comment.
My comment would just be, I agree with Pam. If this particular person has any issues that she can bring back to the board, then I would urge her to go ahead and sit for the exam if it doesn't pass, and then bring it back to our July meeting to say, hey, this is going on with the child, or I had this during pregnancy. As a father of 3, and 2 of my daughters have children, my heart goes out. It's tough, and it's tough to go through pregnancy and work and study. Obviously, she had 9 months to make that decision to study for it and to get it to sit for it, unless there was an issue. And seeing that there's no issue in the papers itself, I think that we set a dangerous precedent to open this up that way.
Thanks, Andy. Any further comment or discussion? Hearing none. Karen, would you call on the roll on this question? And so the motion is to affirmatively grant an extension to June 30 with respect to the candidate Louder.
Andy Baldwin.
Okay.
Janet Davis.
Aye.
Campbell Church.
Nay.
Stephen Eldridge.
No.
Larry Elmore.
No.
Greg Gilbert. Kevin Monroe.
Nay.
Dave Newman.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
No.
Steve Weatherby. No.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I couldn't quite hear all the votes. Karen, could you just let us know what the tallies were? I believe the motion failed, but I want to just make sure.
Mr. Monroe had 7 nays, 3 ayes.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So the motion to grant the extension in Ms. Louder's case is denied. And then Gay, we'll go ahead and proceed to the next candidate that we have for consideration.
Okay. This is Nicole Powell. She has a section, let's see, it's FAR, and it expired on March 31st. Let's see, she is, Wendy, is she, okay, she's asking for additional time to take her last part of reg. This part that is expiring, she's had significant loss in her family. In 2018, she lost her father, her grandmother, and then in October of 18, her significant other was diagnosed with cancer and has gone through chemo, and she has been his primary caretaker. So when she was not working, she was taking care of her significant other. I don't believe she provided any support of this, but and Wendy may have some other, but she did talk about the chemo in 2019. So her credit on FAR has expired, and she is asking for that to be extended. until June 30.
Gay, I do not have any additional support for this.
Okay, so this is all based on her email. It's a little bit different from the previous in that she has had, according to her email, quite a bit going on with caretaking responsibilities and dealing with the loss of some very important people in her life. So I will open it up to some discussion or questions.
This is Janet. Do we usually get like death certificates or some other type of documentation to support their claims?
We do normally ask for that type of information. This one, it looks like I came in a different manner. So this one came through NASBA rather than coming directly to us. So I don't believe I followed up to ask for additional supporting information. So if you are inclined to extend it, we could do it, provided that she provide maybe some death certificate or death notifications or diagnosis of her significant other.
I see that Judy Weatherby has a comment. Go ahead, Judy.
I would be in favor of granting this, provided that that documentation is received. I can personally say those are very difficult times, and to have that many things going on all at once, I have a great deal of compassion. Your world stops and everyone else's continues. That's my experience in losing someone close. So it's hard to reconcile anything in your mind when you're going through those things. So as long as that evidence is provided, I think I would be in favor. I would even make the motion that we grant this extension.
Okay, and thank you, Judy. And I see that Stephen has a comment, and then followed by Andy.
I completely agree with what Judy said. My only concern is setting a precedence, which that would be 2 times today, that we're just taking someone's word at face value. I'm not saying people are lying to us, but I just think we need documentation. Just like if it was a formal hearing, we wouldn't just say it's based on hearsay. So, I mean, again, very sympathetic to it, and I'm in favor of doing this, but I think we need to get the documentation just to keep setting a precedence.
Thanks, Stephen. Andy?
I kind of agree with both. Judy made a great comment. You know, things happen. It was unplanned. That's the key compared to the last statement or the last person that we kind of talked about. Secondly, is that we do need documentation. So I agree with the motion that says upon showing the documentation. So if that's in the motion, or if we can amend the motion, I've kind of lost count of where we are on it, then I would be in favor of it, as long as they have documentation to show to Wendy and her staff that such things did occur.
Thank you, Andy. Any further comments?
I'll make one more. It looks like, I was just doing the dates, that she passed the parts perhaps after the deaths of her family members. I'm not saying that means she was okay, but I think she did. But to me, the key feature is the diagnosis and then recurrence of the cancer that's made her a caregiver, on top of the stress that she'd gone through. So I'm just pointing out that ongoing situation has been the recent extenuating circumstance in my mind, and no doubt she was in a fragile emotional situation as well from the previous items. But I was just looking at the timeline of this.
Thank you, Pam. I'm not seeing any other comments pop up, but I think, Judy, you were willing to make a motion earlier that we would grant the extension subject to the submission of appropriate documentation regarding the circumstances that were outlined in the candidate's email. Are you still willing to meet a person making that motion?
I make that motion with the documentation provided upon Wendy and staff reviewing that for accuracy.
Could I also confirm when you would like to extend this to? Is it, I don't think she asks for a date, or maybe I'm missing it, but FAR expired 3/31, so are we making a motion to extend till June 30 or something further?
I personally, if I can make that recommendation, I would say further, given the COVID and everything that's going on that has complicated and continues to complicate our daily lives. I would be in favor of that. Wendy, I would take your recommendation. What would you recommend?
She has another part expiring in June, but that's going to get covered by our blanket extensions. So she's going to get till 12/31 for that one. If you wanted to be very liberal, you could do 12/31, or I'd probably be more inclined to do September 30 for this one part.
Okay, I will add that to my motion, my current motion, that we give her an expiration date of September 30th.
Okay, thank you, Judy.
Extension until that date.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it. This is Gay.
Thank you, Gay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment or discussion?
This is Janet. I'm just wondering why we would limit this to September 30th. And I mean, we're, I guess, giving a blanket. I mean, I guess I kind of understand, but I guess I would think it'd be better to keep it at December 31st, given the COVID-19 situation.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Any other further comment or discussion? So the motion currently on the floor would use a September 30 extension date expiration timeframe. Janet has mentioned possibly going to December 31. Janet, if you'd like to try to offer an amendment to the motion for the December 31 date, we could take that amendment first and then vote on the overall motion if you would like to offer that amendment.
I would.
Okay. So the amendment that Janet Booker Davis is offering is to effectively replace the September 30, 2020 date with a December 31, 2020 date. And we'll need a second on that amendment first, and then we'll have discussion and deal with the amendment first. Is there a second? So I'm not hearing a second. Let me just make sure that no one wants to second that amendment.
Can you repeat that motion just to make sure we're on the same page?
Yes. So the original motion was to offer a credit extension to September 30, 2020 for BEC, and then Janet made an amendment to that motion to change that September 30 extension date to December 31, 2020, okay. Which is consistent with when one of our other sections would expire, given the COVID-19 exception we've already approved. So right now, the amendment is on the floor, but there's no second to move further with it. So I'll just ask one more time: is there a second for that amended date? So I do not hear a second. So the amendment proposal fails for lack of a second. And we're now back to the main motion, which is to grant credit extension through September 30, 2020. Is there any further discussion or comment on the main motion? Hearing none, Karen, will you please call the roll on the main motion?
Yes, sir. Andy Baldwin,
Aye.
Jennifer Davis,
No.
Sam Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Can I ask a clarification? This is the motion to go to September. I thought it died. I want to vote for the one to 12/31.
Okay, so with the board's permission, then, Stephen, if you want to vote for the 12/31 section, let's go back and to the amendment that was put out by Janet Booker Davis, and we'll assume that you are seconding that amended date in her motion.
Yes, I would. And my reasoning is just to be consistent with what we did earlier, where we've granted anybody from June to December. And we stated reasons why we went on to December, and I think she would be with the same thing.
Okay, so just to clarify, what we now have is an amendment to the original motion. The original motion had a September 30 date for the extension request to be granted. The amendment proposed by Janet Booker Davis and seconded by Stephen Eldridge would replace that September 30 date with a December 31 date. So we have a motion and a second on that amendment. All we would be discussing and voting on now is the amendment date, and we'll deal with that. And then we'll go back to the main motion of, it's either going to be amended or it's not. Andy, I see that you have a comment.
Yes, I think that, I know that we extended everybody else to December 31st. In this situation, I kind of agree with the September in that if when we get to that date, if this person needs additional time or can show that she could not or he could not get into a testing center, then at that time they could come back, jump in and show us that. But I really do think that that's the intent. I mean, we're already giving them to September, which is in addition to what they had requested. And I think that that's fair, but that's just my comment.
Okay, thank you,
Why would we
Andy.
grant everybody else to December 31st if we wouldn't grant this person? I mean, it's the same circumstances that she has to deal with. This person has to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is Janet. That was my point for making that amendment, is because it seems like it would be, or we would be being inconsistent with what we've already done for other people.
Yeah, but FAR is expiring in March, not June.
Well, I believe she
FAR
is
expired March.
FAR.
She says it expires March 31st of 20. I thought that's the one we were going to talk about extending. See, are we extending FAR or are we extending BDC?
Go ahead, Wendy.
The request is to extend FAR. That's the only one we need to worry about. And the issues that she notes don't have anything to do with COVID-19 and not being able to sit for the exam because the test center was closed.
Yeah, so, we're not extending anybody that's expiring in March to December before. Correct. So that's why I think the September date's more appropriate on this one.
My point, though, is if she's going to be in that COVID-19 testing, so to speak, and so she's going to have the same challenges, or they're going to have the same challenges to deal with as the other people, regardless of when she took it.
Right.
Any further comments or discussion on the amendment, which is the December 31 date? Okay, so what we're going to do now is vote on the amendment. If the amendment passes, that December 31 date will be in the main motion, which we will vote on subsequent to this vote. If the amendment fails, then the main motion will still have the September 30 date for the extension request, and we will vote on that. So right now we are voting on the amendment, which is the December 31st date as offered by the amendment by Janet Booker Davis. Any further comment or discussion? Okay, so Karen, will you please call the roll on the amendment, which is to use the December 31, 2020 date as the date of the granted extension?
Okay, Kevin, she says she's lost her connection, so give me just a second here and I'll read the roll.
Okay, thank you, Wendy.
Kevin Monroe,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
Gay Moon, Gay, you're on mute.
Aye. Sorry.
It's all right. Andy Bonner.
Nay.
That was a nay, correct?
Correct.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
No.
Greg Gilbert. Greg, you're on mute.
No.
Okay. Trey Watkins.
Yay.
That was a nay.
No, that was a yes.
Yes, sorry. And Judy Weatherby.
I'm
Judy,
here. I'm here.
You're thinking.
I'm thinking. I'm so confused. I think I know what's going on, but I mean, I know what's going on. I'm just confused. If this fails, will my original motion be voted on?
Yes, it will.
Okay, nay.
Okay, Kevin, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses and 4 nays.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. So the amendment is approved. So the motion as amended that we will now vote on is to grant extension for the FAR section through December 31, 2020. So I know it sounds repetitive, but we just voted on the amendment, which all it did was change the date. Now, if the motion that we will be voting on is approved, it will actually grant the extension request. So is there any
leave a
further?
message and I will return your call as quickly as possible. You may also choose to call.
Is there any further comment or discussion? So now we're going to vote on the main motion as amended, which would be to grant the candidate extension through December 31, 2020 on the FAR section of the exam. Wendy, will you call the roll on the main?
Kevin, this is Trey, real quickly, though. That was provided that they provide documentation.
Yes, that was part of Ms. Judy's original motion, that they would still need to provide documentation of these extenuating circumstances.
Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification. Okay, Wendy, will you call the roll now on the main motion as amended?
Yes. Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Yes.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Motion
Okay.
unanimously passes.
Okay, thank you, Wendy, and thanks everyone for kind of working through that parliamentary process here. I'm showing it's about 11:05, and Dustin and Wendy, from a logistical standpoint, if we mute our microphones but still kind of stay connected here, would it be possible for us to kind of take a 5-minute stretch and bio break here and resume at about, we'll say, actually, let's just resume at 11:15.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay, so just recommend you mute your microphones and make sure your video's off, and then we'll reconvene at 11:15 Central Time here in about 9 minutes or so. But leave your connections open.
I like your term bio break. That's a great one.
Well, it's getting pretty critical for some of us, so I'll tell you that.
I gotcha.
Okay, so we are in recess until 11:15. Try to reconvene. I'm showing that it's 11:15, and we'll give folks a minute to get resituated, and then we'll just check in to make sure everybody's still online and we're able to hear everyone. All right, let's just do a kind of an attendance check to make sure who we've got back. Stephen, are you there? Stephen Eldridge?
I'm here.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Gay?
I'm here.
Okay. Judy Weatherby?
Here.
Great. Trey? Trey, are you with us? We'll circle back to Trey. Let's see, Larry?
Yes.
Thank you. Janet Booker Davis?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Andy?
I'm here.
All right. And let's see, Pam Church?
I'm here.
And Greg Gilbert?
Yes.
Thank you. And Todd Skelton, have you had a chance to join yet? Okay, so we need to go back. And Trey, can you let us know if you can hear us so that we can hear you?
I'm here.
Oh, great. Thank you, Trey. And let's see, who am I missing? I think I've got everybody. Wendy, are you back online?
I'm here.
Okay. I think we have a return of our quorum, and we can go ahead and continue on with the agenda. And Gay, you've got the heavy lifting part of the meeting because we're still kind of under your jurisdiction with respect to the continuing education considerations. One other note, just to clarify on the agenda, because of the general COVID-19 extension, I believe we determined that the fourth individual credit extension request from candidate Weaver was no longer necessary to be acted upon because it fell under the COVID-19 request.
That's correct.
Okay, so Gay, I'll turn it over to you for the continuing education considerations section.
Okay. We have been asked to consider allowing the Project Management Professional or PMP certification exam to qualify for CPE credit under rule number 0020-05-.048 in parentheses. This is a 4-hour exam, so the maximum credit that we could consider is for 20 hours. Attached to the information that we got is a list of other exams that we have previously approved in the past. For example, the Certified Fraud Examiner, the CMA, Certified Internal Auditor, and there is a pretty long list of those. We also got in our packet of information is NASBA's guidelines for what is considered technical learning activities and non-technical learning activities. The topic of this exam is project management, and according to the NASBA information we received, management services under the technical learning does incorporate project management. The person that was applying for this consideration also provided us with an examination content outline that is pretty detailed. And my looking at it, part of the exam is talking about putting an appropriate team together with the right resources. It's also following the project. And then a small portion is being able to analyze the project and see where it stands, if there's modifications that need to be made. So it's a pretty involved testing and coursework. And we're just asked to talk about it and see if we would agree to allow this to be part of this individual's CPE. Any discussions?
Gay, let me just add, if this were approved today, it would apply to anyone in the future that would like to claim it as credit.
Oh, okay. Nobody had requested this?
Well, she did request it, but typically when we do these particular approvals, if you're going to approve it for this individual, we will then add it to the list, and so it can apply to other individuals that are interested.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification, Wendy. And I see that Judy Weatherby has a comment.
I make the motion that we approve this request. I fully believe that it's very beneficial to the profession, that certification and deserves to be part of the CPE.
I would second that. This is Stephen.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion from Judy to approve the recommendation to permit credit to be granted for the Project Management Professional, or PMP, certification examination. And we have a second by Stephen Eldridge. And I think, Stephen, you popped up with a question here, so go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, is this going to be, what type of CPE will this be again?
According to NASPA's, this would be under the technical for management, which incorporates the project management. But Wendy, you might be able to tell us if we chose, we would want to be consistent with NASPA. You know, we've tried to conform our technical areas with NASPA's so that there's not that question about whether or not something qualifies. But Wendy, you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, I guess I was a little surprised it was included as a technical category with NASBA, but that is the best place that I found for it to fall. So I believe the board could determine that you don't want it to fall in these categories, but that could be confusing.
This is Stephen. As far as I'm concerned, it really, what's the difference? As long as it's not A and A, that to me is really the only one that matters. Maybe that's because it matters to me, but technical, tax, general, I guess, what am I missing here?
Yeah, I think when NASBA redid their fields of study,
please leave a message and I will return your call as quickly as possible.
A lot more things were included in the technical category. So, so there are a lot of things that can fall in technical now that couldn't before.
And Wendy, when did we adopt NASBA's? It was just a couple of years ago when we adopted their classifications.
Yeah, I would say 2 or 3 years ago.
And we did that to avoid the confusion of someone, when they're looking at their CPE list and the NASBA has it called technical, but then the board we thought it was non-technical. It was going to make it a lot easier for record keeping to be consistent with NASBA.
Correct.
I would agree, and I think we need to make sure we keep it consistent.
Exactly.
Any other comments or questions with respect to this item? Wendy, I do not know if Karen's back on the line with us to call the roll, or if we should work through you.
I don't think she's on, so I'll go ahead and call the roll.
Okay.
Okay, Kevin,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Yes.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
Larry Elmore. Larry, you're on mute.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert,
Aye.
Trey Watkins, Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay. The motion carries unanimously. So appreciate staff and teeing that up and Gay for leading us through that. I think the remaining item we have in this section of the agenda is with respect to just a discussion in terms of CPE audit timing for the state of Tennessee Board of Accountancy CPE audits.
Yes. In the past, we've sent out the notices around May 15th with a required response date by the end of June. We want to give some consideration to possibly changing the date that the notices are sent out because of COVID-19. And then, of course, that would require an extension of the response deadline. I've talked to Wendy about this, and I think the May 15th for sending out responses is still doable for our staff. Wendy, you can confirm that. The concern is that because people are not allowed in their offices, I know we're considered essential, but our firm is severely limiting the number of people that can come into our office because of positive COVID cases in the building and et cetera. So people may not have access to some of their documentation. So I think we ought to consider extending that June 30 response date to allow people a little extra time as a result of some of the issues that people are encountering.
And Gail, I think one of the other factors is also given the extension of timing for completion of individual and related tax returns being moved to July 15th. In some ways, it may well have extended the busy season, particularly for our tax practitioners. And I think that would be a consideration as well. Wendy, on this point, that I see in the read ahead information, the recommendation from you is to effectively commence the CPE audit process to July 15th, at which time notifications would be sent out, and we would solicit an August 31, 2020 response date for the CPE audit selections. And can you just maybe walk us through why you're comfortable with that? I know we've chatted about the fact that still works well from a staff schedule, but if we get much beyond that, there may be concerns.
Correct. We were, and let me back up just a little bit. We don't necessarily need any kind of board action on this. This is an administrative matter, but we are not out there with you all working in firms and businesses, and I needed a reality check on what we can expect as far as compliance with this. So that's why I wanted to have this discussion today. We talked about it, multiple options internally, and we finally landed on sending these notices out July 15th, which would correspond with the extended tax deadline, and then giving the same time period to respond. I have since talked to Gay a bit about this, and we have no problems internally going ahead and sending the notices out in May as we would normally do. And we could give a longer response time until August 31st. So that may help staff because folks that are able to go ahead and respond can do that, and staff can get that particular audit behind us. So I'm really fine with either option. I think I landed initially on the July 15th date to initiate the audit because of the corresponding with the tax deadline. And and typically when you give people long deadlines, they tend to forget. And so that was kind of where I was leaning on that. But I'm happy to do or listen to input from the board members to see what you all think makes sense from a compliance standpoint. Okay, Larry says I'm cutting out really bad. Did you all hear me?
Yes, I could hear you. How about other board members?
I can.
Hear you, Wendy.
I can.
hear you.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so any thoughts on this?
I think I saw where Judy had a comment she wanted to make.
I do. I'm glad you brought up the latter comments, Wendy, because my recommendation would be that you go ahead and send it out, because there are some people who are not as busy as other people, if that makes any sense. And so it would give those people time to go ahead and, you know, take care of this administrative thing for themselves. And then those that are in tax that are dealing with the government on all this all these forms and SBA loans and everything else, like myself, it would, you know, give them that extension as well. But I think it would, you know, kind of mitigate such a rush when people return their information on the audit. So that would be my recommendation. I think that, I mean, for myself, I'm working harder than ever, just trying to keep everybody paid, because the entertainment industry is completely shut down. Our coaches hadn't moved since the second week in March, with the exception of one. We had one artist that had COVID, tested positive for COVID, and had to stay on his coach for the quarantine period. So anyway, other than that, those are my comments. I think it would behoove the staff if that longer period is granted, but people can go ahead and do it as well.
Okay, thank you, Judy. And I think Janet Booker Davis has a question or a comment.
Well, I do have a question, but first of all, I just want to say that I agree with Judy that I think it would be good to go ahead and send the request out for information now, because with the extension of the tax deadlines to July 15th, that may complicate things around July 15th. But my question is, when would the information be due? I wasn't clear if you were saying it would be due in by July 15th or August 31st.
So typically it would be due June 30, and under my revised recommendation, we would have a due date of August 31st.
Okay.
Does August 31st seem like a reasonable date to the group?
Wendy, I will say this for tax people. If we send them out on July 15th with an August 31 response date, this tax season is crazy, but August 31, from August 15th on, you're starting to really crank it up for September 15th deadlines, and then October 15th right after that. So to me, allowing it from July 15th to August 31st would be difficult. We're still trying to wrap up individual returns, and we're dealing with PPP loan forgiveness during this time. So I think the earlier that you can get those notices out and give people until August 31st, to me, that would be very helpful this time.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that go ahead and send the notices out to the affected population on May 15th and give a deadline to respond of August 31st.
I personally, I like that
Yeah, I like that much better. Yeah.
You too.
Judy concurs.
Okay. So I guess there's no formal action on the board required here because this is really an administrative decision. But I think, Wendy, you've gotten some good input from board members, and the beauty among several blessings of this board is that we've got practitioners who are covering all parts of the spectrum of what CPAs do. And so this is a great sounding board for that, and just appreciate everybody's input. And Wendy, I also appreciate just bringing the issue up so that we can try to manage through things as best we can without burdening the professionals in the field to a degree that is, minimally possible.
Yes, I appreciate the input. That it's very helpful.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on to the legal report section. And again, similar to the licensing committee, we'll deal with this where Andy will lead us as he normally would as the chairperson of that committee through the legal report. But we will take action as a full board on the items that we will need to take action on. And so, Andy, I'll turn it over to you.
Andy, if you're talking, we cannot hear you.
I don't see him on the participant list.
Yeah, I see him as JB on the participant list.
I was looking for Andy, sorry.
But I'm not hearing him.
Yeah, he looks to be, his audio is not connected. So we've lost him for a minute.
Okay. Let's consider doing this while we're trying to get, if Dustin or Wendy, you can try to reach out via cell phone or something to Andy to let him know that we can't hear him. While we are doing that, why don't we go ahead and work through at least some of the items in the new and old business section of the agenda, and then hopefully we'll get Andy looped back in and we can work through our agenda in the legal report. I just heard a beep. Maybe that is Andy. Okay, he says he's working on the issues now. So we'll just hopefully he can ping us when he's back up online here, and that will be shortly. In the new and old business section, I know there was one item, Stephen, that you had mentioned earlier that you wanted to bring up with respect to the discussion in the executive director's report regarding the proposed AICPA and NASBA and Prometric fee structure.
Yes, like I said, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I just think it would be a nice gesture if they would consider postponing those fee increases based on the current economic environment.
Any other comments or discussion from board members on that issue?
And I'll make that a motion. The motion would be that we ask, we as a board just write a letter just asking them to consider postponing their fee increase at least a year or some period, I say 1 year. Because it'll have to be, just in light of the current economic conditions. All three of those entities, Prometrics, NASBA, and the AICPA.
Okay.
Hey, everyone, it sounds like Andy, I think, might be back on. Andy, can you hear us? Well, heard him for a little bit. I don't.
Andy, we still cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
All right. Let's go ahead and deal with Stephen's motion, which was, we kind of switched to the new and old business section. and then we'll come right back to the legal report, deal with that, and then finish the remaining items in new and old business if we can.
Okay.
So, Stephen, we had a motion there. Is there a second?
This is Trey. I'll second it.
Okay, Trey, thank you. So we have a motion and a second, and now open for discussion. You know, the comment that I make on that is I don't like fees to go up either. But at the same time, you know, for example, we know that Prometrics is going to have to space out their seating. They're probably going to have to incur additional sanitation costs relative to keeping things safe from a COVID-19 environment. My hesitancy is not that I'm in favor of fee increases. It's just that I don't know that we know enough of the variables that are involved that these entities are facing to make their own ends meet under these circumstances, to try to know if it's wise to really try to pressure them to rein in their fees. That's kind of the concern that I have.
Yeah, and I respect that. My concern is a lot of these people, these students are being laid off from their jobs. I mean, people who serve as interns in our, firm, they've had to stop working. I'm just trying to be sympathetic to those that are going through tough times, like everybody.
Mm-hmm. Other comments or discussions? I think, Andy, I've got you on as a comment, but I don't know if it's on that issue or to say that you're back with us here.
It's on that issue. In the notice we got, it kind of indicated that we have a break-even point to deal with on the exam, and so the ICPA and NASPA normally give a 2-year kind of notice related to any increases. I think I look back and asked someone, and I think they've only had 3 increases over 16 years, where Prometric automatically does a COLA increase every 2 years. And so with the fact that the exam has been kind of halted during this time, with the fact that the exam takers are not going to be able to take the test at the same numbers that they used to, if we go ahead and allow this, or this increase occurs, it's scheduled on January 1st, 2021. It's a small increase to everybody. I would hate to think that we get 2 years down the road and realize, oh no, we're not going to break even on this, and then we have to jump up the price just to the last people in those last couple of years. And so I think that's the intent, is to go ahead and spread this kind of incident, this COVID incident, over all exam takers. And so we're talking about a $15 increase right now, where it really could be a larger increase and more burdensome to the future people for taking the same exact test. And so they're trying to spread that out. So that's kind of what research I came back with. It was that it definitely is something related to what's currently going on, and that it's very rare that in the past that the AICP and NASPA, given the fact that they don't do it every 2 years, has had to increase that. But it's strictly driven on the numbers and break even.
Thank you, Andy. And I see that Judy Weatherby has a comment.
Surprise. I feel like I talk a lot. My general opinion is to allow businesses and organizations to make their own decisions like that. I personally, I could be wrong, but I think a lot of firms are actually seeing an uptick in business due to the various things that are required by the government and whatnot. But I could be wrong. I think people who are students and whatnot, definitely interns can be hurt. But if there's an economic issue with them, I would hope that the individual firms would step up to help those people. If that small increase is a make or break situation. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I don't think we should be, dictating or not dictating, but really trying to control those organizations and what their price increases are. I mean, there's been so much change, and the fact that they're probably going to have to limit the seating to a third or half of what normally is there. Their costs go way up at that point. And it is with the break-even kind of situation, like Andy said, I think it's important that we understand that they have issues as well.
Thank you, Judy. And I see that Stephen Eldridge has a comment or a follow-up.
I just want to clarify, I'm not asking them not to make a fee increase. I'm just asking them to postpone it, consider tightening their belts like the rest of other small businesses are doing the same thing that don't have the luxury of just raising fees at the snap of a finger. That's all I'm trying to say. And we've got a lot of young folks that don't necessarily work in firms. They may work for small businesses that are trying to take it, and they're having very difficult times.
Thanks, Stephen. Any further comment or questions before we move to the motion that's on the floor? Okay, we will go ahead and vote on the motion. And Stephen, if you want to recap that for us, please.
Okay. My motion was to ask the board to allow the board or management of the board to write a letter to the three organizations, NASBA, AICPA, and Prometrics, ask them to consider postponing their fee increase by 12 months. Instead of 2021, it would be 2022 in light of the current COVID-19 economic challenges that everybody's facing.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. So we have that motion. We have the second by Trey Watkins. And Karen, are you back with us?
Yes, I believe so, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can now. Is there any further comment or discussion? We'll go ahead and call the roll on that motion.
Andy Bonner.
Nay.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Nay.
Stephen Eldridge.
Yes.
Larry Elmore.
No.
Greg Gilbert.
No.
Monroe.
Nay.
Dave Ruth.
Nay.
Trey Watkins.
Yes.
Jeannie Weatherby.
Nay.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I show that the motion fails on a 7-3 vote. But Stephen, I think the sentiment and the concern is still heard, with respect to our practitioners, not only here in Tennessee, but elsewhere as they try to, scrap for the seats that are available for the exam. We will go ahead and move back to the legal report section of the agenda now that we've got Andy wired back in. And Andy, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to deal with this whereby as the committee chair, you'll lead us through the walkthrough of the cases just as you would. And then we will not vote as a committee. We will vote once as an entire board, and that vote will be the vote for each of the tranches of cases that we'll be working through.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I want to thank legal for and staff for putting together the civil penalty guidelines. I know we had asked for that just as a guide, and so we have that guide now, and so we really appreciate that. It kind of gives us a range and reference it by statute and violation and so forth. So everybody had a chance to review that before we when we set out the advanced materials. We also have the detail pages of the 19 cases that we're bringing before you today that Maria had put together. In addition, we have our summary synopsis report. And so what we'll do is we'll break down the 19 cases into 3 categories and kind of go through them that way. Normally, we do a little bit more on the cases due to time and everything else today, but but not to cut it short. If you have any questions whatsoever on the cases or comments, please go through and we'll take it in each tranche. We will first cover cases number 1 through 7. And the recommendations here are either a close or a letter of caution or a letter of warning. With that, I know those have been sent out in advance. There's usually not much discussion here, so I will ask for any discussion at this time with any cases 1 through 7.
Thanks, Andy. This is Kevin. I did have one question for staff on case number 4 that has a letter of warning recommendation. You know, when I read through the actual facts or background of that particular case, it did look like there, you know, was at least an indication of potential violations. And I just wondered and was curious as to why staff ultimately reached the recommendation there to basically just simply issue a letter of warning. Was it because there would be difficulty in actually like bringing a case to hearing just given the lack of evidence, or what was the sense of thought there?
Hi, Kevin. This is Maria. Thank you. Yeah, so this case, we talked extensively about this, Sherry and Wendy and myself. And basically, I recommended a letter of warning. I don't think if this went to formal hearing, we'd actually be able to prove lack of due professional care. It's a very long history between the complainant and the respondent, and it seemed that there was like kind of a personal relationship there. There were some divorce proceedings involved. And so there were indications that the respondent, you know, didn't file and those kind of things. But we concluded that that was within his like, I guess, right as a professional. There were some responsibilities on the part of the complainant that kind of contributed to that. So they continue to engage the respondent even after knowing that this was how the things were. And then also, I think one of the big things that respondent said that he wanted to meet with the complainants in person, and that was an issue that they wouldn't meet with him. So that's kind of where we stand on it. I'm happy to answer any more questions, or Sherry might want to add.
Thanks, Maria. That kind of gets at the question I had. I'm fine with that. Any other comments or questions on any of the 7 cases in the consent tranche of the agenda?
I have a question on number 3. This is Larry.
Go ahead, Larry.
I'm totally confused on number 3. It's the one about the church pastor and some information that a member disclosed. So it says that the respondent denies a client relationship with the pastor, but did we verify that? Did we ask? I mean, did we ask for any evidence that there was no relationship? And then up at the first paragraph, it says the respondent was able to obtain this information as a result of her position with the church, but I couldn't find anywhere what her position with the church was.
Larry, this is Sherry. I can answer those questions. First of all, in terms of, I did ask about a client relationship. It was in dispute. The pastor said that this individual helped him with his tax returns. She said he actually said she filed the tax returns. She said she did not. She answered a question or two for him. She is the accountant at the church. That is what the respondent's role was the accountant at the church. I did ask the respondent if he had an engagement letter supporting the engagement, or even a back copy of the return that showed that the complainant, the respondent had signed as a paid preparer, and he never provided that information to me.
So what did she disclose, and who did she disclose it to?
Basically, what happened was there was a misuse of the church's tax-exempt certificate. This actually was uncovered by church staff, and it was actually even a DA office investigation of this matter as well. From my review, the disclosure she made was to the church governing board and to the DA's office, which seems to be appropriate under our rules for third-party inquiries.
Okay.
Thank you, Larry, and also Sherry and Maria. Any other questions for any of the cases 1 through 7 in the consent part of the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, based on no other questions, I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, cases 1 through 7 as presented.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Andy. Is there a second?
Second, this is Larry.
Seconded by Larry. Thank you. Any further comment or discussion? Karen, will you call the roll?
Andy Bonner,
Aye.
Candace McGregor,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
Karen, I think we're losing you. Can you get closer to your mic?
Karen, it's still very difficult to hear you. What we may try to do, if we can, is just to have Wendy do the roll call on this one till we can get your audio cleaned up.
I can do that, and I apologize. I don't have the same listing of individuals, so I'm going to start over.
Okay.
Okay. Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
And Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. The motion to approve the recommendations for cases 1 through 7 is approved unanimously. And Andy, turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now we're going to look at the second tranche of the proposed discipline for cases 8 through 13. They vary and not as consistent as the first 7, but in those right there, I would say that we sent out everything in advance and just ask everybody who has read it if you have any questions or comments related to specifically cases 8 through 13.
Andy, I have a question on number 9.
Okay.
We say in the next to the last paragraph that there's no evidence that the respondent has completed a test work since January 20. That's not clear to me as to whether did we ask him or what gave us that. That's kind of a negative assurance. There's no evidence that he did, but did we look to see if he did?
This is Sherry. Yes, we did ask the question and got the statement in a sworn statement as well that no attest work had been completed since the termination, and we are unaware of any attest work that's been completed. According to the respondent, basically it's their general practice during tax season to not do any attest work until after April 15th. So that's a normal procedure for this particular firm as well. Does that help?
Yeah, I just would prefer a positive statement as opposed to a negative. It seems like it'd be better to say based on a sworn statement and based on our review or based on something that there was no. It just seems like we're just saying there's no evidence that he did, but we're not saying how we went about deciding that.
That's a great suggestion, Larry.
Larry, this is Maria. I'll make that edit to the final report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Larry. Are there any other questions or comments on any of the cases in the second tranche?
This is Janet. I had a question on number 8. It says that the letter stated respondent had missed 5 of the benchmarks in his CPE. What can you just clarify what those 5 benchmarks are?
Can you hear me? Sorry, I was muted. Let me look at his file real quick. One moment.
I just wasn't sure what that meant.
While she's looking, Sherry, typically the benchmarks are you need a total of 80 hours of CPE. You need 20 in each year. You need 2 hours of state-specific ethics. You need 40 technical hours. And I'm missing the 5th one. But when we talk about benchmarks, those are the things that we're looking for.
Wendy, did this individual do a test work? Because normally there's that A&A requirement too.
Okay, so that would be the 5th one. So basically, we're looking to make sure you've not only submitted the requirements, but you've met those benchmarks.
So then this is saying that he basically missed all of that?
Yeah, I want to say, without having the file in front of me, which I think Maria is looking at, but I want to say that he submitted maybe only 8 hours.
Okay.
This is Maria. I was able to pull up his file, and yes, that's correct. He only did submit 8 hours. And so if you'd like, I can read the benchmarks, but it's basically what Wendy said. So I'm just repeating her.
That's what they sound like. But yeah, I just couldn't think of what else he could have done if he missed all 5 of the benchmarks. But anyway, so I guess he didn't do very much.
Yeah, and then I did get to speak with him, and then he said he wanted to switch to inactive, but it was explained to him that doesn't exempt him from being responsible for the prior CPE requirements.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Any other questions on cases 8 through 13?
Mr. Chairman, seeing no other questions, I would like to make a recommendation that we approve proposed discipline on cases 8 through 13 as presented.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Second, and that sounded like that was from Larry. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So second by Larry Elmore. Any further comment or discussion on cases 8 through 13? If not, Wendy, would you call the roll, or Karen, if you're audible here?
I'm hoping I'm audible. I've switched microphones.
Yes, we can hear you better now. At least I can.
Thank you. Okay. Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That motion is approved unanimously. And Andy, turn it back over to you for the representation cases.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now we're on re-representations 14 through 19, as indicated in the synopsis report. With that, there's 1, 2, 3 cases that are recommended to be closed. There's 2 civil penalties to be levied as recommendations, and also 1 respondent is to appear before the board, being number 17. I'll ask at this time if anybody has any questions or comments related to those cases.
This is Maria. On number 14, I would just like to state an update. This individual was diagnosed with dementia, and at the time that I had written this entry on the report, it was I had that information from this individual's colleague, but I just want to update everyone. I have medical documentation of the diagnosis, so that is in our records, and I'll just put an entry if everyone is okay with that, just noting that I did receive confirmation from a medical professional.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments on any other cases?
Andy and Maria, I just want to clarify before we go for a vote here that 17 is related to the case, to the appearance this morning. And so if they're voting on, so if they wanted to have taken any action, they would have had to have done that this morning on these, or what are they voting on with relation to 17?
Yeah, so number 17, I will, I spoke with Stuart about it, but I think we want to recommend for close because everything that we want him to do is included in the vote earlier on his reinstatement of his license.
Okay.
All right, so we'll note that change, that just to mark through that recommendation of close on number 17. Any other comments or questions related to these cases? All right, then, seeing no other comments or questions, I would recommend that re-representations 14 through 19 be presented with one change, the change under number 17, that that be listed as closed.
Thank you, Andy. Do we have a second?
Second, it's Greg.
Greg, thank you for seconding that. Any further comment or discussion on cases 14 through 19? Hearing none, and just to clarify, so the recommendation on 17 is closed, and also Maria indicated she will add a note that we have the medical documentation in hand with respect to case 14. Karen, will you please go ahead and call the roll?
Yes, sir. Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
Larry Elmore.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
Kevin Monroe.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Trey Watkins.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Karen. That vote proceeds unanimously, and Andy, thank you for working us through the legal report in very efficient fashion. So appreciate that, and appreciate also the legal staff work and Wendy's staff work that went into the process here on the legal report. With respect to the next item on the agenda, it's new and old business. And one of the things that we announced at the beginning of the meeting would be that if there were members of the public participating that wanted to make a public comment, they would be welcome to do so during this segment of the meeting. I know that we have representatives of the TSCPA that have signed in. And do you all have any comments or anything that you would like to make here during this section of the meeting?
Kevin, this is Brad. I don't have anything specific, but I do want to congratulate you. Well-run meeting, command of Robert's rules and efficiencies are quite impressive, and congratulations on a great meeting. And I also want to add my congratulations to Rhodes College and Pam Church. Wendy had mentioned that several of our recent candidates were recognized by AICPA as the Elijah Watt Sales Award winner, but the top scorer in the state is going to be recognized in this issue of the CPA Journal in Tennessee, and that is the Rhodes candidate. Grant Ramsey. He was a top, and that was outstanding. And just want to congratulate Rhodes on that.
Oh, wow. I had not heard that. So thank you for that information and for your congratulations. That means a lot.
Sure thing. You know, we are in the process of beginning our fiscal year. We ended at March 31, and we had some due statements go out in April. I just want to thank the board for its ability to be flexible with the licensees and recognize that COVID-19 does present some real challenges out there. We've heard from a number of our members. We represent over 10,000 members, many of which, actually, majority of which are in industry or small firms. And clearly, the CPA profession is not immune to financial hardships at this time. And our board of directors met last Friday, and they granted us a rather liberal interpretation to extend dues payments and try to accommodate those members who may be having some financial hardships due to furloughs and layoffs and small business or other business issues. But we are not only going to offer some liberal extensions on dues, but also on peer review. We've received support from AICPA as the administering entity in Tennessee to offer rather liberal extensions for the next year on those firms who are having difficulties in completing the reviews. We're a little concerned about some of the load in a year that it may occur as a result, putting some pressure on the reviewers as well as the firms, but we'll work through that. I understand the AICPA peer review board's meeting today, and I'm going to be taking some of that into consideration and see how they can best go about doing that. And as you well know, with groups being limited and our chapters have been unable to meet, and our live CPE programming has been non-existent for the past 2 months, we've expanded our online opportunities for e-learning. Members who normally attend those chapter meetings, and they're being very well attended. We're offering these complimentary. We're expanding our online learning platform and really taking everything for the next several months online and virtual in the form of video rebroadcast or live stream. Naturally, we've got some online learning opportunities in the form of self-study, but we're expanding the number of courses that are available free of charge to those who want to take that. And, while the opportunities for complimentary and free CPE are not unlimited, I think any licensee in Tennessee, or at least through the TSCPA, who desires for compliance reasons to get their CPE credits at low or no cost can do so through TSCPA. We have a much broader curriculum available through some vendors that charge for their services, and we're trying to keep those costs down, pass them along either at a reduced or free cost. And our board is very supportive of that, but it's been a trying time, extraordinary time, and we're trying to do what we can and compliment the Board of Accountancy for doing the same. I understand that the cost increases for NASBA and AICPA and Prometrics may be incurred, but I compliment you on your actions today, and I think that together we'll get through it. But if there's anything that TSCPA needs to be doing that we're not, we're very receptive to your suggestions, comments, ideas, and thanks for the opportunity to attend today. And that's it for me, Kevin.
Brad, thank you, and Kara also for attending, and also
Kara may be on the line and she may have something to add. I'm not sure. Kara, you still there?
I'm here. The only thing I would add, I echo Brad's comments, and thank you for allowing us to attend virtually today. The only thing I would add is that the state-specific ethics course is now online. It was revised for the outline that the board approved, I think at their October meeting. We recently recorded Dr. Jennifer Wesky from Christian Brothers University, and that course is now up and available for purchase by licensees.
That's great news. Appreciate that, and appreciate the work that went into the course, and more broadly, just appreciate the work that's going in to try to support the profession in trying times. So Brad and Kira and all of the folks that are working with you, we just appreciate your efforts so much. And I think the word that you mentioned, Brad, was together, and it really is a team effort. And we're blessed to have, a strong society with active membership and a broadly diverse and experienced board on the Board of Accountancy. And I'm glad, that they're working together so well along with their staffs. Are there any other members of the public that would like to address the board at this time? Okay. There are a couple of other items I want to touch on, and Larry's indicated he also has a comment he'd like to make before adjournment. Two things. One is, I think while we were in meeting, Karen has sent us all emails with respect to the timesheet documentation that we need to provide back to her. So please be on the lookout for that email. And if you can, provide back what she's requesting today, and we'll get that taken care of and buttoned down. The second thing is in the July meeting, and right now we don't know whether that will also need to be virtual or whether we can meet in physical form. We're going to have to just wait and see what the conditions are and what the state regulations are and what our preferences are to try to keep us all safe. But that is the meeting that we would typically reorganize and elect officers. And so if you have a preference to self-nominate as an officer or to express support for another member of the board as an officer, if you could please let Wendy know, that would be appreciated. And then thirdly, and also see Greg has a comment as well. This would, in a normal situation, be the last meeting for Trey, having served a full 3 terms on this board, or 9 years with respect to his service to this profession in a board member capacity. And many of those years were through rather tumultuous times, I guess, given the leadership changes that were going on in administrations and on the staff level. And Trey, I just would like to thank you for the extended service, for the knowledge, the expertise, the time that you've generously given to this board, and would welcome any other board members who have comments that they would like to make with respect to your service.
Yeah, this is Larry. Can I go ahead and chime in?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would echo what you just said about Trey. I know Trey has been a big help to me over the last few years when I first came on the board, and helping educate me. When I was a rookie, I needed all the help I could get, and he tried to rein me in a few times and help me along. So I appreciate that, Trey. He and several others were a big help to me, and Casey, he and Casey helped me a whole lot. So appreciate it, Trey. I wanted to echo what you also said about TSCPA. I think we're in a very enviable position where Brad and Kara are so much help to us. They take time out of their days to come and attend the meetings, and they are very, very helpful to all of us. And that's not always the case on all the boards, I know. So it's a great blessing. Also, Kevin, it's hard enough to rein this group in person, but I think Kevin did a great job today running the meeting and managing all the technical issues for us. I know we had a technical person on hand to help with that, but at the same time, Kevin, I appreciate your being able to handle this meeting remotely, and look forward to hopefully being back together in July.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, Larry. And then I see that Greg and Judy have comments.
Kevin, thank you. Just a word of thanks to several people. One, the TSCPA representatives, Brad and Kara, for joining us today. And I think we will get through this together. I like the use of that term also. Kevin, I think you mentioned it. Also wanted to thank Wendy and the staff, Wendy, Maria, Shara, Dustin, the entire group. But Wendy, I thought your executive director's report was just exceptional. I'm sure it always is, but it really struck home with me this time. So thank you for that. And Kevin, well, everyone, but I serve on a couple other not-for-profit boards, but one in particular that drives me crazy because the director doesn't understand Robert's Rules of Order. And Kevin, you do. So thank you very much for that.
Welcome, Greg. And I think next in the queue is Judy Weatherby.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a few minutes to just thank Trey for his service and for all of the information and just your gut on things, Trey, has been valuable to this board. It was a pleasure to serve with you, and I as well have learned things from you. I had hoped we would all be together to celebrate at my home your service, but since we weren't able to do that, I proposed that we try to do that at another time and invite you then. I know that it's a long trek from Memphis, but if you would allow us to do that, we would still like to honor you at that time when the COVID-19 permits us to carry on.
Thank you, Judy.
And then see that Gay Moon also has a comment.
Trey, being a tax person, I have so much gratitude for you on your peer review and some of the more attest work type comments. It's been very helpful to me, and I know it has been helpful to the licensees that we've worked with. So thank you very much. And Wendy, do we get to see Trey in July because we don't have replacement board members, or?
Well, we will just have to wait and see. I do expect there's going to be a backlog in trying to get appointments made. So, so if an appointment is not made, then we graciously ask the people to continue to serve. So there's a chance, if his schedule allows and an appointment hasn't been made, that he would be back with us.
Well, thank you, Trey, for all of your good sense and help. I have really appreciated it, and I've enjoyed working with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I think, Trey, also I neglected to mention earlier, you previously served as the chair of this board, and in fact may have been called upon to do that in almost your very first year, coming right out of the gate to do that. And it just is, the continued approach to try to help us develop consistency in our policies and in our actions, whether it's disciplinary decisions or policy decisions on CP, or you name the issue. The institutional experience for 9 years that you've been kind enough to develop and then share with your colleagues over those years has made a huge difference. And would just like to turn the floor over to you if you have any comments, and we're all secretly hoping we will get to continue to serve with you at least into the July meeting as a colleague.
Well, I would be honored. 9 years goes by pretty quickly. I'll tell you, it just seems like yesterday I got on there. We had some trying times over the years, but I will honestly say this, the staff, the board, the people we have in place do a magnificent job. And I'm so glad we are in the place we are now. I feel great about the future of our profession. The people monitoring it, the people watching it. Everybody has something to do. And so while everybody comes from different perspectives and different backgrounds, it's very valuable to this board. I hope, pray that, the good hard work will continue, and I know it will with the people involved. I thank y'all for allowing me to serve with you. So you have kinder things probably to say to me than my family does right now. So anyways, I do appreciate it. I'm going to miss this greatly when it's gone, because it's great to serve your profession, and I truly believe that. And it's been eye-opening for me to kind of get a grasp of how our profession operates and what happens behind the scene. There's so many people that don't know what we do, and it's valuable. So I appreciate the opportunity to serve. I appreciate everyone's perspective that they bring to the board, and look forward to y'all's service. Thank you. Thank you very much for the words.
Trey, thank you. And before we adjourn, are there any other comments that anyone has for the good of the order?
Kevin, I would just like to add my thanks to Trey for his support and always being one to talk about representing the public interest, and sometimes leading the hard charge against things. And so I'm certainly going to miss having you on the board and our discussions regarding peer review and other things that you're so passionate about. So we do have a plaque at the office for you. So I'm going to hold that just in case we are able to get together again in July. And if not, I will mail it to you. So thank you, Trey.
Thank you, Wendy. Also, just a thanks to everybody, and particularly including Dustin and other members of the staff for trying to facilitate this kind of first ever extraordinary meeting. And also thanks to the governor and his staff and the executive order that he issued that, in my view, wisely allowed reasonable accommodations in order to keep the business moving. We still have to meet by law 4 times a year, and this is one of those meetings, so we appreciate that very much. Any other comments or questions before we adjourn? If not, I hope to see you in July, but that decision is to be made later. But I can't wait till we can all meet back in person and see one another. Thank you, everybody, for contributing and making this meeting a success, and we will stand adjourned.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody.